absolutely incredible. No matter how many people went in front of me, behind me, I had my line and I had a sense of direction. I always say that I live in a psychic world that isn't made for me. And I'm in a city that accepts blindness. And I can't quite let myself believe it. But I don't believe it. But I feel like it here.
It's 20:05 in the morning. I just woke up.
Feeling quite low energy, to be honest. And I think I was so elated.
I was in bed. I can't believe it. I went to bed. It was great.
About the platform being accessible. It's just hit me like a ton of bricks that I'm now going to a new hotel room and a new environment. It's really hard being in a new place when you can't see it. I took a from Tokyo about 5 years. It's impossible to come here without acknowledging its past. But first, I'm going to stay overnight in a Buddhist temple on the outskirts of the city. The majority of Japanese people are Buddhist, so I want to understand what I can learn from this religion's teachings. Welcome to the community accommodation. Oh, my God, I'm Lucy. My host is Shoko, the wife of the head monk. Together, they run the temple. Can I take you out? Yes, lovely. When I first heard that I was going to a Buddhist temple, I was like, am I going to be able to take a bus right this? But then the inner journalist within me was like, can you be a Buddhist monk if you look at Hi, Lucy. Thank you very much for bringing. The temple for me is somewhere that you can really be with nature. I love that I can hear so much of the wilderness because it is in such a remote destination. Have you ever spread in a futon before? No. Oh. Yeah. Oh, I love it. It's 5 a.m. Just getting ready for my 6 a.m. meditation. I slept so well on this futon. It's so nice. I realize I can't open my eyes. I went to listen to the monk's morning service, and the chanting really does relax you to the core. It's something about being in fight or flight all the time and having a stress response to different environments around me.
じゃあ、閉じていただきます。で、大きく深呼吸を
Let's go there.
I feel like it's really centered my nervous system. This has definitely helped with my sensory overload of being in a new country and experiencing different things, because at the end of the day, I am just relying mainly on my hearing. So coming here, it's like a reset point for me. Thank you so much for preparing this. I'm so excited to try it all.
ありがたくいただきましょう。いただきます。
Oh, thank you, Master. First time using it. Okay. Okay. Right.
動かします。
I'm a chopstick novice. I just could not get the hang of them. No. But I was pleased because I've been taught. I got a little grey though.
It's 4:45 in the morning. 4:45 in the morning. Can you believe that?
I actually felt really proud that I was eating with them. I was very slow, but I'm not used to at home. I'm a very confident person, but I don't believe that my host is still shining in the same way that it did before I lost my vision. I still do see hope as a glass half empty rather than half full.
水がですね、これだけしかないと思うんではなくてですね、水が少しある時にですね、これだけしかないではなくて、これだけあるんだ、ありがたい、飲めるじゃないかっていうふうに視点を変えることができる。それが仏教の一番大切な教えでですね。
I think this self-exploration in Japan is teaching me a different way to view hope and acceptance of myself. Is Buddhism accepting of disability in, just being in this temple? I feel like it is.
天童さんの方もですね、足りないところもあるし、間違いも犯すし、だからこそ人間は助け合って生きている。それがですね、より社会、私たちの幸せにつながっていくというのが仏教の教えだなというふうに感じています。
It's my last day, and I've come to meet Mariko Higashi in Hiroshima Peace Park. Ever since I learned about the disaster there, I felt compelled to find out about how people from Black and the families that have followed actually deal with the aftermath of that. Could you audio describe where we are, Mariko?
ルーシーの後ろ、この方向に原爆ドームがあります。1945年8月6日、アメリカ軍が投下した原子爆弾リトルボーイがこのほぼ上空600メートルで着陸しました。ドームの屋根がある下だけが残っていて、周りは全部停止しています。
Man was mother and grandmother lived in Hiroshima at the time of the bombing. The Marikos were sharing their stories with the world.
ちょうど8月6日の朝、玄関に立った時にピタッとで原爆が落ちた時でした。気がつくと家から30メートル離れた芋畑の中で倒れていた。私の母の母、私から言えばリアが、陸軍病院で働いていて、原爆の光で右目が、飛び出てぶら下がったまま、被爆から6日後に見つけました。なので、その母の看病をずっとしています。
I'm so sorry.
大丈夫。被爆者のこんな人間として一番残酷な思いをしたことを世界中の誰にも合わせたくないという母の思いを私も感じたので、それを引き継いで世界中の人に語っていきたいと思っています。亡くなった子供の学校名が書いてあります。第二次世界大戦でラスト動員中に原爆だけでなくて数日。
They were so young. They were the same age as me when I lost my eyesight. There's so many nuggets. Does it keep going? I didn't know it was this big.
広島に住んでいたのは当時35万人と記録があるけれど、その年の年末に14万人が亡くなりました。
Even though I've lost one of my main senses, they didn't have the chance to start again and to figure out what their future was. You know, I owe it to them to have a future that is bright. Meeting Marika-san and learning about her family story and history made me believe that you can have a massive problem in your life and still have hope. Meeting everyone that I've met on this trip has been a true blessing. I can't wait to take a new sense of hope back home. I'm going to remember what the monk has taught me. I'll meditate. Understand that being with nature is one of the best things you can do for your mental health. Understanding that hope comes even from the darkest of times. Marika taught me that. And a tactile experience is a beautiful one.
Good morning.
Sighted experience.
I'm in your bed. Lovely sleep. And then I woke up. I needed a pee. Oh my god. And now I'm just like, I'm not gonna go to bed. I'm just gonna be awake now. This is it. Yeah. So I'm just gonna have a smoke on some tobacco and drink my tea. And I don't know.
Hey, I'm Zoff with the catch up.
Yeah, good morning. That's Instagram. Oh, fucking hell.
Exchange for the release of the Israeli hostages, 39 Palestinian detainees are free. Youth crowds have turned out in the West Bank to welcome the women and children. Some other stories now. Former Paralympic champion Oscar Pistorius is going to be free from jail on parole. Nearly 11 years after he murdered his girlfriend Reva Steenkamp, he shot her multiple times in 2013, later saying that he mistook her for a burglar. He's set to be released in January. And
you may have noticed the streets were extra chaotic today because of Black Friday deals. This tradition started in the US, but now the UK participates in the yearly event too. Time for Christmas shopping then. And it's a big week for Reading and Leeds. They've announced Fred again, Lana Del Rey and Catfish and the Bottlemen as headliners for next year's festival. It will be the only time Lana and Fred again will play UK festivals in 2024. And now for 10 seconds of rhino cuteness at Chester Zoo as they celebrate the birth of the eastern black rhino. This is one of the world's rarest mammals. This is so adorable. I cannot cope. Please, where can I get some pet baby rhino? You're all caught up now. See you later.
Hello again. Many of you will have had a dry day of weather on Friday with plenty of sunshine around. Blue skies like these, pretty commonplace across the country. However, it certainly was quite chilly, wasn't it? Temperatures on Thursday 15 degrees, well above average, but compared with that, for some temperatures were 7 degrees lower on Friday, actually quite a bit below average for the time of year. Now, what followed from that sunny day is these clear skies, which took us into the first part of the night. Temperatures have been dropping like a stone and already are well below freezing in many areas underneath these clear skies. The exception to that really cold theme is across northern and eastern Scotland and the eastern side of England, where there's a bit of a breeze around, and that might just keep the frost at bay. However, I think in the very coldest areas in the countryside, we could see temperatures as low as -6. That's potentially even the case across our very coldest areas of southern England. So a freezing cold start to the day on Saturday, but your weekend getting off to a sunny start as well. And for most, that's the way the weather's going to stay all day. Just blue skies and sunshine overhead with barely a cloud in the sky. And the exceptions, again, northern and eastern Scotland, down the eastern side of England, there'll just be a few showers which occasionally could graze some of our coastal areas, but otherwise it's dry and it's cold with temperatures typically between about 5 and 7 degrees Celsius. We are going to see some change in the weather picture as we head into the second part of the weekend as this area of low pressure moves in off the Atlantic. A cold and frosty start to the day, and as this cloud comes over the top of that really cold air near the surface, it's going to be one of those days where temperatures are very slow to rise, and actually most of the day it will stay really, really cold. But Scotland and a good part of eastern England should stay dry with sunshine for most of the day. Without weather, you'll see some thicker cloud working in, a bit of damp weather for Northern Ireland, Wales, and West England, and eventually you might see temperatures high to about 9 to 11 degrees, but really late in the day. Area of low pressure pushes eastwards Sunday night, bringing some rain. That clears off into the continent, and as it does so, it will shove back our way some cold air that originates from Europe and Scandinavia. So next week it stays very cold. Into that cold air, occasionally there will be some weather systems, probably mostly bringing outbreaks of rain. But I can't completely rule out a few flakes of snow as well.
The
world is changing around us, and it's changing fast. On Future Earth, we'll investigate the biggest climate stories of our time, and we'll analyze why they matter. And we'll reveal the actions you can take to help protect our planet.
Join Carl Nazzle for Future Earth. Watch on BBC iPlayer. I've just spent the last 2 years as one of the BBC's Middle East correspondents. But one of the things I love about my job is being out in the field. On the morning of the earthquake, I was actually in Istanbul. This is a country in shock. This was an entire neighborhood, and it's completely destroyed. It was hundreds of apartments, thousands of people. I've always really liked finding people and talking to them, like people's stories. Because if I'm going to talk about things that some people live through, I think the best way is for me to see it and understand it myself. Sometimes vulnerable people have joined this conversation and they are telling us that some of them lived here, they knew it was dangerous. Then when I tell you what's happening, hopefully you will have more faith in me to tell you that story accurately and impartially and in a way that really means something. Hello, live from London. This is BBC News. 24 hostages freed by Hamas have now returned to Israel, while 39 Palestinian prisoners are also released under the hostage agreement. These live pictures from Gaza, where the truce appears to be holding. Much needed aid is flowing into the strip, with more expected in the coming hours. And the former Minneapolis police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been reportedly stabbed in a US prison. Hello, I'm Lucy Gray. The temporary ceasefire agreed between Israel and Hamas appears to be holding, paving the way for a second day of hostage exchanges to take place on Saturday. Israel says Qatar, which is mediating the deal, has given it a list of the names of the next 13 Israelis to be released. Most of them are children. 24 hostages released on Friday have spent the night in hospitals in Israel. They are said to be in good health. The Israelis have been reunited with their families and are undergoing further medical and psychological checks, as are the Filipino and Thai hostages freed under a separate deal. The United Nations says 137 trucks carrying urgently needed aid crossed into Gaza on Friday. It's the biggest humanitarian convoy to enter the territory since the conflict began early last month. Similar quantities of aid are scheduled to follow over the next 3 days of the truce. Thousands of displaced Palestinians have used the pause in fighting to go back to their homes, despite Israeli warnings that the war is far from over. Let's show you some live pictures of inside Gaza now. This is Khan Yunis in the south of the country. We can also see the Gaza skyline, which, as we were saying, the pause in fighting seems to be holding. This is exactly 24 hours now since that truce began, and as you can see, it's looking calm, which bodes well for the release of further hostages promised today, later on today. And as we were hearing, also a lot of aid getting in yesterday, and hopefully more to come as part of this deal. There's been a more flow of aid than has been happening in recent days, so hopefully that will continue later on today as well. Let's get this update from our Middle East correspondent.
Israeli hostages were taken with the 4 children released today, and 4 women, 3 mothers and 1 grandmother. The director of that hospital said that they were in good physical condition, but that they were carrying out further medical and emotional checks on them. And we've also had the other Israeli hostages going to other hospitals, and the Thai nationals and the 1 Filipino also released, being checked as well. So that's for the Israeli side. As far as the Palestinian side was concerned, 39 Palestinians released from Israeli custody. They were taken, most of them, to the occupied West Bank and reunited with their families, and some taken to their homes in occupied East Jerusalem. So as far as the framework of this deal has gone in day 1, I think the prisoner exchange element of this has been shown to have been extremely successful, given just how challenging it has been for the two sides to pull this deal together through the mediator Qatar. But the conditions on the ground remain extremely challenging. Just think about the weeks of war that led up to this, the unprecedented nature of the fighting that we have seen, the brutality of the events that sparked all of this. So there remains the risk that things can still go wrong. Having said that, we now go into day 2 with the Israelis saying that they have been handed a list by Qatar from Hamas of the next batch of hostages to be released. So the hopes will be that this can all be repeated once again on Saturday.
Tom Bateman there. Well, the US played a major part in securing the ceasefire deal. President Biden spoke earlier from Nantucket, where he's spending Thanksgiving, and said that they won't stop until all hostages are home.
Today has been a product of a lot of hard work and weeks of personal engagement. From the moment Hamas kidnapped these people, I, along with my team, have worked around the clock to secure the release. We saw the first result of this effort with the release of 2 American hostages in late October, followed by the release of 2 Israeli hostages. I've consistently pressed for a pause in the fighting. for two reasons: to accelerate and expand humanitarian assistance going into Gaza, and two, to facilitate the release of hostages.
Well, let's get more on how the first hostage exchange unfolded. Our senior international correspondent Orla Kieran sent this report from Tel Aviv.
Israeli pilots setting off for a key mission to bring hostages home after almost 50 days in captivity. Israel has been holding its breath for this. The journey began when a convoy of vehicles crossed from Gaza into Egypt. A glimpse of the hostages inside on the road to freedom. A number were neighbors in the same kibbutz. Earlier, 72-year-old Adina Moshe was helped from an ambulance in Egypt, moving slowly but chatting and smiling. And this was the welcome as the hostages arrived tonight at an Israeli airbase. There is collective relief here that at least some have been freed. These are the 13 Israelis who came back today, spanning the generations. It's an emotional moment for those whose loved ones remain trapped in Gaza.
I know family members of the kids who are coming back home now. I can't believe it. It's so happy to know that they're here in Israeli territory. I feel as if part of my family came back.
Among those freed, a mother and daughter seen here in a family birthday video. Amelia Aloni in blue is 5 years old. She and her mother Danielle now on home soil. But for many, the waiting continues. A circle of women singing and remembering. They are friends and relatives of Itai Spirsky. They know he won't be home soon. Only women and children are due to be released. For Itai's cousin, Naama Weinberg, mixed emotions today.
When I will see the those hostages back here in Israel, I will be very happy for their families and for them. But I'm very happy for them too. But we also need to remember that it's only the 12 or 13 hostages that will be released today, hopefully, and 50 total in the next 4 days is less than a quarter.
In Gaza today, streets bustling once again after the ceasefire took effect. Families going to look for food or check if their homes are still standing. Many here want peace for longer than 4 days. We hope the ceasefire will be extended, Mohammed tells BBC. Today is the first day we woke up without bombing, without being terrified, with nothing to fear. Back in Israel, a helicopter landing tonight at a hospital here in Tel Aviv, where some of those released will have medical checks. They disembarked shielded from view to be reunited with their waiting families. Orla Kieran, BBC News, Tel Aviv.
Part of the exchange deal, Israel on Friday released 39 Palestinian prisoners, some of whom had been convicted of attacks on Israeli police officers. They returned to the occupied West Bank and to East Jerusalem, where they were greeted by chanting, clapping, and flag-waving crowds. Israeli security forces used tear gas to quell the celebrations. Lucy Williamson has more.
Hours before the prisoners arrived, Israelis and Palestinians met at Betunia checkpoint. The meeting place marked in the sky with tear gas. The return of 39 prisoners today, a moment of happiness for their families, but also a moment of victory for Palestinians across the West Bank. Amna was waiting for her 27-year-old daughter, serving a 12-year sentence for for trying to stab an Israeli security guard. I thank God for this. I'm so happy. For sure, Hamas are the ones that released me, but I don't want to stay. I don't want trouble.
I think that it's a sign of hope not only for the Palestinians but also for the Israelis to continue with this ceasefire and to stop the war. We would like that this happen without the hostage of Hamas, without what Hamas did with the hostage of the Israelis. The Israelis will not allow these people to get out.
A quarter of the population here has spent time in Israeli jails. This, the first prisoner release in almost a decade, is a moment for his son to remember. As night fell, a few Hamas flags appeared in the crowd, fluttering in the light of fires lit in the road. This has strengthened their standing here, but some said this was a moment that united all Palestinians. As the Red Cross arrived, news of a 15-minute delay pushed trust to its limits. Crowds surrounded the vehicle, chanting, "Where are the prisoners?"
We're told the releases have been delayed because of the scuffles that were happening here between groups of Palestinian men and the Israeli security forces.
Minutes later, another vehicle surrounded, this time in joy. Inside, 39 prisoners, women and teenagers. Some of them had been in solitary confinement since the 7th October attacks.
This is a small victory for Palestinians in a war that has already exacted a very heavy price. To Israel, the prisoners being released tonight are a security threat. To those gathered here to receive them, they're victims of Israel's occupation, and their release is a symbol.
Inside, some danced in jubilation, one wrapped in a Palestinian
I'm released. I've been released for a year.
brutal attack.
Yeah, but a big chunk of my life I was fucking sectioned.
Crisis, an unthinkable price that brought them home.
United Kingdom, right? If you want a fucking war, come to the United Kingdom. Attack our government.
Showing the pictures of the Gaza skyline a moment ago, showing how 24 hours on, this truce does seem to be holding. So it bodes well, doesn't it, for the prospect of further hostage releases today?
Absolutely. The sky is clear for the second day in a row after the truce, which is a good news for the people inside Gaza and for the deal to be successful, because all the hopes for this deal to be successful in order to build on it for a lasting ceasefire and then ending the war. So it's a good sign for both parties to hold the deal respected. And I think one of the main reasons for that is the hostage in the package, because I think the hostage make like a pressure on both sides to commit themselves to this deal. So yesterday was released 13 Israeli, including children and women, old women, and for the Palestinians, about 39 Palestinian, 24 women, and 15 teenager. And that's a good news, because today would be the second round of the swap between the Israeli and the Palestinians, and the Israeli army revising the list for today. Nothing revealed about it yet, but it will happen today. Will be the second round of a total 150 from the Palestinian side, detainees and the Israeli prisoners, and a return for 50 of the hostages held by Hamas.
There is also the prospect that Israel has offered, isn't there, that for that they may offer 10 more hostages to be released. If Hamas get released 10 more hostages, they would keep the truce going for another day at each time.
Because like people in Gaza welcoming that, and they went out in the streets to buy their stuff, to look at the damaged houses, and express their happiness with that. So it might put pressure on Hamas in order to release more hostages in return for one extended day as Israel. It might be up to negotiation, but at least so far it's successful, and the willing and the international calling for Israel and the Palestinian to more like ceasefire and more like swap between prisoners and hostages, I think might convince the parties to extend it after the 4 days. It might not happen immediately after the 4 days. It might happen after like 2 days. So still we don't know that.
Yeah, just tell us a bit more about what it is like inside Gaza at the moment, people taking advantage of the pause in the fighting.
Yeah, there is like the pictures coming out from Gaza and like what's written on the social media. People went there to get their stuff from the markets. There's still people complaining it's not enough. Even there is more than 200 like trucks should be every day according to the deal. There is fuel, gas for cooking for the people, but still people still like complaining because it's still 2.2 million people there. So so even the aid is increasing compared to before the truce, but still people like roam there. But at least some of them went to their home to check the damages. Only the people try to go to the north were not allowed by the Israeli army to go there because Israel army gave the instruction not to go there. Even they asked people to move to the west of Khan Younis and west of Gaza, close to the sea, in order for the next stage of the Israeli operation to crush Hamas, as they said.
So the question is, I suppose, even though there's more aid is getting in now, is it even reaching areas in the north of Gaza?
It's very difficult to go there because like not many people know Gaza because more of them went to the south, and especially in Khan Younis. But even Khan Younis, Israeli like are going behind the Hamas, as they said. So some of them moved to the west near the sea. So the intensity of people and the density of people there is huge. So the pressure on the aid is a lot. So the north needed more, but the north is not populated by many people as compared to the south.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Saeed Shahata from BBC Arabic there. Now, the Metropolitan Police is to distribute leaflets at a pro-Palestinian march, which is planned in London on Saturday. The leaflets will set out phrases which, if chanted or displayed, might break the law. The Met says it will position Arabic speakers
There is no law.
on the march.
This country's fucked. The police are dodgy. The NHS is dodgy. Fuck it out. I've done nothing. And I was 18 years in section units.
On our website, just head to bbc.com/news. There are regular updates from Israel, Gaza, and around the world, of course. You can also download the BBC.
If I was a millionaire, I would pay someone to attack the NHS.
There are reports from the United States that the former Minneapolis police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been stabbed in a U.S. federal prison. According to the Associated Press news,
I'd spend every penny on getting the NHS attacked, fucking destroyed.
Chauvin, a former police officer, is serving several long sentences over the death of George Floyd. Mr. Floyd died after Chauvin knelt on his neck for over 9 minutes after he'd been handcuffed, sparking worldwide protests against racial injustice. Police in Dublin were out in force overnight to prevent a repeat of the previous day's rioting. There were several arrests on Friday evening. On Thursday, 34 people were detained after shops were looted and vehicles were set on fire. The disorder was blamed on anti-immigration protesters. It broke out after an alleged knife attack on a school care assistant and 3 children. Let's go with some of the day's other news now. Police have identified the victims of a deadly car blast at a border crossing between the US and Canada. Kurt and Monica Villani died when their car became airborne and crashed on the Rainbow Bridge in Niagara Falls. It's still unclear what caused the couple's vehicle to rapidly accelerate and burst into flames. Leader of the far-right Freedom Party in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, has suffered a blow in his efforts to form a government. The country's main centre-right party, the VVD, has declined to join him in a coalition. Mr. Wilders won a surprise victory in this week's general election, but fell short of the necessary parliamentary seats to form a government. Finland says it will set up special registration centres to house would-be asylum seekers crossing from Russia. According to the Finnish authorities, hundreds have arrived in the past week, originally from countries including Syria and Somalia. They're now closed on one border post with Russia. Estonia has also seen a surge of people crossing. The American rapper and music producer Sean Diddy Combs has been accused of a historical sexual assault by a third woman in just over a week. The new complaint alleges he and another singer took turns raping the unnamed woman and her friend more than 30 years ago. Efforts to free 41 construction workers stuck in a collapsed tunnel in India are on hold again. Just a few meters of rock and earth separate Indian rescue teams from the workers, but there is a problem with the equipment being used to break through the debris. The men have been trapped for nearly 2 weeks. So let's go live now to our South Asia correspondent Samira Hussein. And there have been so many setbacks in this, haven't there? Tell us what the latest one is.
Yeah, there really has been a lot of setbacks, and I think it really illustrates how complicated this rescue effort is. Now, you can see the mouth of the tunnel behind me, and it's inside where all of that drilling is happening. This latest setback has to do with the fact that they're not drilling through just rubble, but there's also pieces of metal that have been crushed in with that. And so what happened is that the drilling machine got caught on some of that metal as it was drilling, and part of the blades broke. They made attempts to pull it out. Those were unsuccessful, and now they are manually cutting down the blades so they can then pull the drilling machine out. Once they're able to pull the drilling machine out, they will repair it, and then they will also be going in manually to further assess the situation and make sure that they're able to break all of that metal. So it has been a very long time that these men have been stuck. Remember that this accident happened nearly 2 weeks ago when a nearby landslide crushed this partially built tunnel. You can see that they're building this tunnel through a mountainside, and because it was under construction, that's why there's all these different kinds of debris in there and not just rock. And of course, there are 41 men that are stuck inside. Now, officials keep telling us that they are still in good health. They are receiving regular food and water. They're getting fresh fruit, lentils, rice, and food and water and oxygen. And they are in good shape. But of course, as long as this goes on, what's important, of course, is to keep their mental health as well. And that's why officials are really trying to stay positive and keep them feeling positive that eventually they will be rescued soon.
Well, thanks very much, Samira Hussein there. Got some spectacular pictures from Mount Etna in Italy to show you now, where the volcano is erupting again. A substantial flow of lava stood out against the snow-covered peaks of the mountain in Sicily. Italian officials have issued a flight alert for nearby air traffic, but so far the nearest airport, just 20 or so miles away in Catania, is unaffected by the volcanic activity. Now, there was a time when it looked like the traditional record shop was fading into extinction. Well, not anymore, with older fans re-embracing their love of vinyl and younger fans discovering it.
I love it so in bed. I was like asleep on my bed, stretched out under a nice big thick new. I bought a new duvet, right? It's lovely.
Back in business. For the first time since 2019, HMV's flagship store is trading again. And for the band booked for the grand reopening, it's madness.
Please head off the stop away. I think they'll be shut by about this time tomorrow. No, it's lovely, of course it is, and it's nice to see that. Get the shine on and all that's coming back, of course it is. Get the shut the skylight roof. The atmosphere's been great, yeah, you know, we've got a very good reaction to this new album. It's #1, by the way.
And how special is it to be back on the original site of the HMV?
Fantastic, yeah, because this is where we used to steal records. You know, you can't do that anymore. It's all on a computer, isn't it? CCTV.
HMV has hosted the likes of Blur and David Bowie in the past. And it all began here for the Beatles some 60 years ago. Bosses here hope the return of its first ever store will not just attract those with a sense of nostalgia, but a whole new generation of customers through the door.
It's really busy, but I came here to look at vinyls because I have a day off school today, so it's actually really, really good to get new vinyls.
We love our music and we've shopped in this shop many times, so yeah, good to come back.
What's it like being back inside, Abe?
Absolutely fantastic. Came here years and years ago, and it's good to buy vinyl, CDs, and everything, because there's such a vinyl revival. I've actually got record player, got all the old 80s one stuff out. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like a joy. It's the shops that we need back on Oxford Street.
The midday trade is brisk and lively, and every year the demand goes up.
His Master's Voice first opened here in 1921.
HMV.
The question of how much can be spent this week.
I used to go to HMV.
And has closed before due to fires and financial issues.
Ultimately, this was the first store for HMV, so to now be here, 1921, and over 100 years later, we're getting back here where so many famous people have played. It's a dream come true.
I just want you to know that this is just all a poor excuse for me to go shopping for CDs.
It's hoped the return of HMV will
will boost Oxford Street's fortunes.
The great thing about HMV, apart from the history, coming back to its original stories, it brings a new demographic back onto Oxford Street. It brings a sense of community. They're going to have live concerts here. So it's a whole new dynamic that we're going to have.
As for fans of physical records, this latest comeback is music to their ears.
Harry Lowe reporting there. Let's take you back to Gaza and just show you the skyline there again, because it is now gone 24 hours since that truce started, and it does seem to be holding, which all bodes very well for the potential of the release of a second group of hostages later on today. Israel says that Qatar, which is mediating that deal, has given it a list of the names of the next 13 Israelis to be released. Most of them are children, and 24 hostages, of course, were released on Friday, and mostly have been spending the night in hospitals. Plenty more, of course, on our website as well. Just go to that bbc.com/news.
Hello again. Many of you will have had a dry day of weather on Friday with plenty of sunshine around. Blue skies like these, pretty commonplace across the country. However, it certainly was quite chilly, wasn't it? Temperatures on Thursday reached 15 degrees, well above average, but compared with that, the sun temperatures were 7 degrees lower on Friday, and actually quite a bit below average for the time of year. Now, what followed from that sunny day is these clear skies, which took us into the first part of the night. Temperatures have been dropping like a stone and already are well below.
I'm all right, actually. I'll tell you what, my headache is gone. That sleep was a lovely sleep in my bed, and it was nice. It was so good. I couldn't believe it.
Just keep the frost at bay. However, I think in the very coldest areas in the countryside, temperatures as well as
I've got clean socks by the front door. I fucking forgot them. I must go and get my socks. Oh, fuck's sake. My feet are cold now. I've got the door open. I'm trying to freshen up.
The exceptions, again, northern and eastern Scotland, down the eastern side of England, there'll just be a few showers which occasionally could graze some of our coastal areas, but otherwise it's dry and it's cold, with temperatures typically between about 5 and 7 degrees Celsius. We are going to see some change in the weather picture as we head though into the second part of the weekend, as this area of low pressure.
I'm wearing these today.
Comes over the top of that really cold air near the surface.
My new trainers. They're really cool, actually. I see them and I thought, I've got to get these. You know what I mean? I must have these, and I got them. I knocked them down £10, and I got them 30. They were 40 on them.
And eventually you might see temperatures climb to about 9 to 11 degrees, but really late in the day. Area of low pressure pushes eastward Sunday night, bringing some rain. That clears off into the continent, and it does so. It will shove back our way some cold air that originates from Europe and Scandinavia. So next week it stays very cold. Into that cold air, occasionally there will be some weather systems, probably mostly bringing outbreaks of rain, but I can't completely rule out a few flakes of snow as well.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
It's a good photo of
I have an opportunity to create chaos.
There is always an email. We are so insignificant in this cosmos. Do you want some facts on baguettes? I'm just feeding you the stories. Maybe this is the context.
The Context. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
Morning. Come and have a seat. Of course, I'm not going to go easy on you. There are some really big questions we've got to try and get answers to this minute. But I'll be fair, and we just want to hear what you've got to say. So, shall we get on with it? Join me to hear from the biggest names inside and outside politics.
Sunday with Laura Koonsberg. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
ready. Change can happen in an instant. Check on the BBC Weather app.
This is BBC News, the headlines. 13 Israeli hostages freed by Hamas have now returned to Israel from Gaza after being taken to an Egyptian hospital for medical assessments. The group includes young children and elderly women. 10 Thai nationals and 1 Filipino were also released by Hamas in a deal separate to the one mediated by Qatar. As part of the exchange deal, Israel released 39 Palestinian prisoners on Friday, some of whom are convicted of attacks on Israeli police officers. They were returned to the occupied West Bank, where they were greeted by chanting, clapping, and flag-waving crowds. Israeli security forces used tear gas to quell the celebrations. And the former Minneapolis police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd has been reportedly stabbed in a U.S. federal prison. Derek Chauvin was seriously injured when he was attacked by another inmate at a medium security prison in Tucson. Now on BBC News, it's time for Unspun World with John Simpson.
Hello, and thanks for joining me for this edition of Unspun World. A pause in the fighting, but the pictures from Gaza are still pretty disturbing.
Homes that have been completely destroyed, people then running in using their bare hands, trying to pull people out.
Is Vladimir Putin off the hook in his war against Ukraine?
The Kremlin believes that it can outstay. It's got the staying power more than the West, the staying power to see this through.
A politician who seeks advice on political matters from his dead dog via a medium wins power in Argentina.
He's coming up with different approaches and very radical approaches, and I think that's what people wanted. They just wanted something else.
And the head of Abu Dhabi's giant oil company takes control of the next round of climate change talks. Why?
They say the problem is fossil fuels. We need to be part of the solution.
And so Israel has agreed to declare a temporary ceasefire in Gaza and begin an exchange of prisoners. With hindsight, perhaps the key moment came when Israel's hardline defense minister, Yoav Gallant, told some families of the hostages that the most important thing was to destroy Hamas, and a number of the relatives walked out in disgust because they believed the most important thing was to get their relatives free. President Biden has warned the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel is losing the moral high ground, thanks partly to the television pictures which come hourly out of Gaza showing the death and destruction caused by the Israeli attacks. The BBC gets its pictures from a whole range of sources in Gaza. Yogita Lamai, who's normally based in India, has been putting together many of the BBC's reports from those pictures at its bureau in Jerusalem.
I think what we've been seeing every day for the past few weeks, homes that have been completely destroyed, people then running in using their bare hands because they have no tools, trying to pull people out. We've been seeing every day videos from different hospitals in central and southern Gaza. And these are areas which are supposed to be the safer areas. They're away from the north of Gaza, where the Israeli military had asked civilians to evacuate to. Ambulances rushing in, injured being brought in, doctors trying to scramble to save them. Very often when they're brought in, people with minor injuries, they're just laid out on the floor and the treatment starts right there. And then every day also, the other thing we get are pictures of hurried funerals, usually outside hospital compounds because they're considered relatively safe. So, bodies that are wrapped in sheets with the name of the person who's died written on them with a marker. And then families in, sort of hurried prayers that are held outside and people bidding tearful goodbye to their loved ones.
You get a clear understanding of
what the power situation is like, for instance, the water situation, medicines, these kinds of things?
We've been speaking to people who've been telling us what's been, I think, most difficult for families is access to clean drinking water for themselves, their children. The UN says there's only 1 to 3 liters of water per person for all of them. We've been told by people how they have to stand in for hours in queue to try to get water. The UN has been saying repeatedly that there are parts of Gaza where, because there's a fuel shortage, so the sewage system has stopped working, desalination plants have stopped working.
And what about the medical side of things?
22 out of 36 hospitals are out of action. We've been speaking to doctors and nurses and staff in hospitals that are still operational, mostly in central Gaza and in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. They've described how they're running out of medicines. We've been speaking, for example, to women who've been pregnant and who've gone into labor. They've talked to us about how they've had to deliver babies with no painkillers at all. The existing facilities are so overloaded that women have been cut off from safe delivery. So we've even spoke to mothers who've given birth in overcrowded school shelters run by the UN.
Yogita, tell me frankly, you're seeing these pictures, often really terrible pictures, every day, but they are only one side of the story. It's the Gaza side, the Palestinian side. How difficult is it for you and for your colleagues to be really impartial?
My job, in the way I see it when I'm working with journalists in Gaza to represent the picture of what's happening there, is to try to provide, through the true tools we have at our disposal, the most truthful picture that we can of what is happening there. And then I think, it's a responsibility of the BBC as a whole, of all of our different outputs, of all of our different programs, and of all of our editors, to ensure that that is put into the fuller context of what is going on in Israel and Gaza.
Do people around you, Jewish people around you, Israeli people, do they understand what's going on inside Gaza?
I have been speaking to, for example, the families of some of the hostages who've been held in Gaza, and when I've asked one of them, I'm going to talk about one specific person whose 84-year-old mother is being held in Gaza. And I asked him the question, just when you look at that, when you look at the bombardment of Gaza, when you look at what's happening there, your mother's there, what's your immediate reaction as a son? And he said, it's terrifying because I know she's not in a safe area. I'm not sure what's going to happen to her. He actually, prior to the 7th October, he said, I very much believe in a two-state solution, but 7th of October has changed everything for us. We cannot now live side by side with what he describes, his words. He said, we cannot live side by side with the devil. Of course, there are different perspectives depending on who you speak to. Most people, anyway, who I've spoken to will say that Hamas needs to be destroyed one way or the other.
The Gaza conflict has come as a welcome relief to one man, Vladimir Putin, whose war against Ukraine seems to be hanging in the balance at the moment. The Ukrainian counteroffensive has clearly not been the success which Ukraine's supporters in the West were hoping for. And although the Ukrainian forces have established themselves on the Russian-occupied bank of the river Dnipro, the Russians are consolidating their positions at a time when NATO countries are getting more and more worried about the future of the war. I asked the BBC's redoubtable Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, for his thoughts about the way things were going for Vladimir Putin.
He seems to believe that Russia is getting the upper hand. And there's a bunch of reasons why I think he probably believes that at the moment. The Russians seem to believe that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has not been nearly as successful as Kiev had hoped. You could say the same thing about Western sanctions as well. The West had hoped that the tsunami of sanctions imposed on Russia caused huge problems, huge difficulties for the country. Well, Russia this year is set to enjoy, I think, 3% economic growth. And I think the feeling is in the Kremlin that the geopolitical situation may be changing slightly in Russia's favor. President Putin looks at the situation in America, a very polarized country. Republican voices grow louder against massive aid for Ukraine. I'm sure the president is hoping that Donald Trump will come back to the White House. That could change the situation hugely. Also, there's a feeling here that perhaps in Europe there's now a degree of uncertainty. And then you've got Gaza, of course, and the attention of the West has switched to a large degree from Ukraine to what's happening in the Middle East. So for all of these reasons, I think, the Kremlin believes that it can outstay, it's got the staying power more than the West, more than Europe, the staying power to see this through and emerge the winner here, whatever being the winner is. It's still not clear what victory would look like for Vladimir Putin.
I suppose for him, simply surviving is winning, isn't it?
Possibly, yeah, quite possibly. To be honest, it's hard to imagine Vladimir Putin now as a peacetime leader, because over the last 2 years, Russia has changed hugely. The economy is almost on a war footing now. The Kremlin has used to try to live up a wave of patriotism. If you look at who's been put in prison, for example, John, at the moment, and what for, and you compare that to who's been let out of prison at the moment, you see a very strange situation. I was in a trial in St. Petersburg a few days ago for the verdict in the case of Sasha Sashenko, an artist and a musician, who was sent to prison for 7 years. What was her crime? She'd replaced some price tags in the supermarket in St. Petersburg with anti-war slogans. Compare that to the case of Vladislav Pavlich, who was a convicted murderer and brutally murdered his girlfriend, stabbing her, I think, more than 100 times. He was sent to prison last year for 17 years. It's emerged that he's been let out of prison to fight in Ukraine and has received a presidential pardon.
And the whole issue of Gaza has been really to Putin's worked in his favor, hasn't it?
I think so. There's no doubt that the awful events of October 7th, what's followed, diverted attention to what is happening in Ukraine to the Middle East. The talk shows on Russian television that were talking about the special military operation constantly switched to talking about the situation in the Middle East. And I think that was welcomed by Russian officials. They believed that it would lead to a reduction in Western military assistance for Ukraine and would accelerate Western Ukraine fatigue.
What's it like as a Brit to be roving around in Moscow? Is there more hostility to you from ordinary people and from the authorities? Or is it less? I mean, what's it like?
There's a lot of anti-British propaganda in the state media here. We're very much made to feel like the enemy. And yet, travelling around, I don't get the sense of ordinary Russians that they see us as an enemy. A while back, we were coming back from a trip, and we stopped off at a petrol station. I was buying some biscuits in a mini market at the petrol station. And I picked up the biscuits, and a man came up to me. I've seen you before. Your face looks familiar. I said, well, I'm the journalist. Maybe you saw me on YouTube or something? Because the BBC is blocked here, right, in Russia, so you couldn't have seen me on the BBC. He said, yes, I saw your interview with the Belarus leader, with Lukashenko. I said, oh, right, okay. And he said, I'm going to pay for your biscuit. The sea of anti-Western rhetoric, which is washing over the state media here, doesn't affect everybody.
The man Argentina has chosen by a landslide to be its next president has been widely mocked by its critics. After all, Javier Milei, former tantric sex guru consults his dead dog via a medium on political questions facing him. His plan for solving Argentina's overwhelming economic problems makes the experts groan. He denies that the far-right military dictatorship of 1976 to 82 killed anything like 30,000 left-wing activists, even though the figures thoroughly attested. And yet, although he makes a lot of noise about Argentina's right to the Falkland Islands, which Argentinians call the Malvinas, he's careful to say that the islanders' views must be taken into account. That's not at all a popular view in Argentina, and it may hint that a more pragmatic line runs underneath the hokum. I asked Katie Watson, the BBC South America correspondent, what she made of Javier Milei.
He's made some huge proposals introducing the US dollar instead of the Argentine peso, decimating the central bank, all these drastic proposals which, could garner an awful lot of support among people who were just desperate for something different. But you've got to keep in mind that Argentina is going through an economic crisis, more than 140% annual inflation, 2 in 5 Argentinians are living in poverty, and those drastic measures, could spell disaster, certainly speaking to economists.
Replacing your currency with the US dollar, it's been done in various countries. It's not a solution necessarily, is it?
He's coming up with different approaches, and very radical approaches, and I think that's what people wanted. They just wanted to do something else. Let's just try anything, because we've tried things before, it hasn't worked, so let's just get something else to go. That's certainly what speaks to his success. That change is moving away from his approach.
Yes, of course it is, in a major way, but Milei is replacing terrorism, isn't he? This extraordinary movement that kicked off in the 1940s under General Perón, and we assume now that Peronism is now a dead duck completely.
It's a phenomenon that I don't think is going to go away. It's certainly been questioned, especially with Christina Kirchner in the last decade or so, who's taken Peronism to Kirchnerism, which is another branch. There's been lots of splits, if you like, in what Argentina sees as Peronism. It's much more of an ideological movement than an obvious political left or right. I think that in itself is still very much ingrained in Argentina. Javier Milei has criticised that Peronism, that Kirchnerism, that populism. He himself is a populist character. Certainly, it's down to his personality and his radical approach that people have decided to vote for him. It might be that Peronism is weakening, but I don't see it going away.
What about the feeling in the country around about Brazil, where you are, in Chile, very nervous?
Gustavo Petro in Colombia has called this a difficult time for Latin America. Lula here in Brazil stopped short of congratulating Javier Milei. He congratulated the authorities who carried out the electoral process. Javier Milei has been criticised. He and his vice president have continually called into question the number of victims during the Argentine dictatorship. They've been criticised for undermining and threatening democracy. And Lula, in his tweet after the election results, made a point on how important democracy was. It's not good news for Brazil. Javier Milei has again made big about Brazil and about not wanting to do business with communists. Of course, socialist Lula is not a communist, but certainly that has been a major attack for him from the far right in the region. So that relationship is bound to come under pressure. Brazil is one of the biggest trading partners, along with China, for Argentina. China's also been criticised by Javier Milei, but that's something that going forward, you can have a political difference with these countries, but it's going to have a massive economic impact if you do endanger those relationships. So it's going to be interesting how Javier Milei works out the political rhetoric with the economic benefit, because those relationships are probably worth keeping, even if he doesn't agree with their politics.
If our small, fragile planet starts to heat up by 3 degrees, that would be a savage threat to life on Earth. And scientists are now talking about it as a very real possibility. the major international conference on ways to save ourselves from this, COP28, is just about to open. Yet it's been hosted in the United Arab Emirates and chaired by Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, the head of Abu Dhabi's oil corporation, which has made itself unthinkably rich from the very thing that's been blamed for so much of the danger to our world, fossil fuel. Activists like Greta Thunberg have said this is a sign that COP28 isn't intended to succeed. But what's the reality? I took the views of Justin Welch, the BBC's climate editor.
What they say is, look, without us at the table, the oil industry at the table, we cannot have a solution. The problem is fossil fuels. They've acknowledged that very explicitly. Dr. Sultan talks about that repeatedly. They say the problem is fossil fuels. We need to come up with a solution. But there are some kind of people criticise the UAE for a certain amount of things.
State-owned company is investing billions, hundreds of billions, so at least more than
150 billion. Yeah, so in capacity, the plan is by 600,000 barrels of oil a day, currently produces about 2 billion a day. So a significant increase in capacity at a time when we say we almost have to halve carbon emissions. They have a defence for that as well, John. They say, look, our oil is the easiest to produce and the cheapest to produce. Typically, so it's they say it's the lowest carbon oil. But
9 minutes to 6.
when we talk about oil and gas and fossil fuels generally, there is a tendency to kind of
I won't be going to H&T pawnbrokers until probably about midday.
millions of barrels of oil and gas.
And then I'll be sat at Cozy Cafe.
We look at our own behaviour as well and the efforts of our government.
Egg and bacon sandwich, toasted, with tomato sauce and a cup of tea, $6.25. If I go to Poppins, I'll be eating liver and bacon, and then I might be looking around the corner and getting Domino's pizzas and all that, and then going to Sainsbury's and getting some pies and all that. So I'm just like, I think I'll just go to Cozy Cafe and not go anywhere. Because I can't walk very far, so I probably won't go up to bloody Sainsbury's and all that. I don't know. I might do it. I'm not sure.
All of that is a product of fossil fuels. A number of reports by really serious organisations have all said it's now looking as if we will
NHS fucking really fucked me up. 18 years, locked up in section units, no exercise, no fucking freedom. NHS, I want you to die. I want someone to attack you. Mental health. If you end up getting in trouble, I'm going to laugh. I'm going to be fucking so happy. Mental health is a dangerous situation. It is, honestly. NHS, they do not know nothing about mental health, mental well-being. Fucking Christ, I can't believe it. I was great with families. I saw pianists all the families, and they loved me. It was great. The piano man, wow. The children would play the pianos and all that. It was great. It was really good. It was all right. My mother, right? She had fucking 4 sons, and my brother was a drug dealer, and my other brothers were smoking loads of cannabis. And fucking Lee gets angry, and then Russell gets bossy. And I mean, they're fucking shit. My family's shit. It's fucking rubbish. If anyone needed a foster placement, it was me. I didn't realise my mum would do what she done.
Well, the last point on the 1.5 is if you have that 1.5, how much
And why the NHS getting away with murder? They're killing babies. Why can't we kill the NHS?
No comeback. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the ultimate tipping point, if you like, is extinction. Just in Roland, climate editor. Right around the world, people are switching off the news on television and radio and refusing to buy newspapers. It's obvious why it's happening right now. The news is just so ultra depressing, with its images of children dead and dying, angry demonstrators, explosions, hatred, fear, the temperatures on course for levels that will be hellish. The word comes from the UN Secretary General. Entire species being wiped out, entire countries liable to disappear under the rising waves. Argentina, run by a man nicknamed the Mad One, and his role model, Donald Trump, quite likely to return to the world stage. Of course, a lot of Americans and others think that's the good news. Vladimir Putin, if not successful in his war in Ukraine, at least not destroyed by it. And these are just the subjects we've been discussing in this one edition of Unspun World. But I do hope we haven't driven you to think of switching us on to, yes, times are worrying, but choosing not to think about them doesn't help. We need to look dispassionately in our world and work out what our own views are.
We need to destroy the NHS. That's what we need.
Things will change. Peace of a sort will return to Gaza and Israel.
NHS are fucking terrible.
Global warming may at least be mitigated, but putting our fingers in our ears is never a good solution for anything. So that's the end of my sermon, and the end of this edition of Unspun World. Until we meet again, goodbye.
Hello again. Many of you will have had a dry day of weather on Friday with plenty of sunshine around. Blue skies like these, pretty commonplace across the country. However, it certainly was quite chilly, wasn't it? Temperatures on Thursday reached 15 degrees, well above average, but compared with that, the sun temperatures were 7 degrees lower on Friday, actually quite a bit below average for the time of year. Now, what followed from that sunny day is these clear skies, which took us into the first part of the night. Temperatures were dropping like a stone and already are well below freezing in many areas underneath these clear skies. The exceptions to that really cold theme is across northern and eastern Scotland and the eastern side of England, where there's a bit of a breeze around, and that might just keep the frost at bay. However, I think in the very coldest areas of the countryside, we could see temperatures as low as -6. That's potentially even the case across our very coldest areas of southern England. So a freezing cold start to the day on Saturday, but your weekend getting off to a sunny start as well. And for most, that's the way the weather's going to stay all day. Just blue skies and sunshine overhead with barely a cloud in the sky. Now, the exceptions, again, northern and eastern Scotland, down the eastern side of England, there'll just be a few showers which occasionally could graze some of our coastal areas, but otherwise it's dry and it's cold, with temperatures typically between about 5 and 7 degrees Celsius. We are going to see some change in the weather picture as we head, though, into the second part of the weekend. This area of low pressure moves in off the Atlantic. A cold and frosty start to the day, and as this cloud comes over the top of that really cold air near the surface, it's going to be one of those days where temperatures are very slow to rise, and actually most of the day it will stay really, really cold. For Scotland and a good part of eastern England should stay dry with sunshine for most of the day, but out west you'll see some thicker cloud working in, bit of damp weather for Northern Ireland, Wales and Western England, and eventually you might see temperatures climb to about 9 to 11 degrees, but really late in the day. Area of low pressure then pushes eastward Sunday night, bringing some rain. That clears off into the continent, and as it does so, it will shove back our way some cold air that originates from Europe and Scandinavia. So next week it stays very cold. Into that cold air, occasionally there will be some weather systems, probably mostly bringing outbreaks of rain, and I can't completely rule out a few flakes of snow as well.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Chetty and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Free at last. The Israeli hostages released by Hamas spend their first night with their families.
Palestinian prisoners have also been freed as part of a deal that sees a 4-day pause in fighting, allowing much-needed aid to get into Gaza.
Calm in Dublin overnight as a heavy police presence prevents a second night of rioting in the city.
In sports, Everton manager Sean Dyche says he was shocked at their 10-point deduction. Speaking for the first time since the record-breaking punishment, Dyche called it disproportionate ahead of their match against Manchester United tomorrow.
Good morning. It is a cold and frosty Saturday for all of us this morning, but at least there will be some beautiful sparkling winter sunshine out there. Yes, it's going to stay dry and settled for most, but it will be rather cold with it. All the details coming up shortly.
Good morning, it's Saturday, the 25th of November. Our main story today, the people of Israel and Gaza have had their first night of relative peace in 7 weeks since the Hamas attacks of October the 7th, as a temporary ceasefire appears to be holding.
The pause in fighting allowed aid to enter Gaza and the exchanges to take place. 24 hostages held by Hamas, which is 7 prisons.
More Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners are expected to be released today. Our Middle East correspondent Yolanda Nell reports on a rare moment of hope in the conflict.
An arrival to celebrate at this Israeli children's hospital, as many of the freed Israeli hostages were flown in last night, much to the relief and happiness of a crowd of well-wishers. The women and children were said to be physically well. Altogether, 13 Israelis were released after they spent almost 7 weeks being held captive by Hamas in Gaza, along with 11 foreign workers. Earlier video released by the military wing of Hamas shows the moment they were taken to vehicles belonging to the International Committee of the Red Cross. These are the youngest of the hostages, Aviv, who's 2, and her sister Raz, who's 4, shown in a family video. They were snatched by Hamas gunmen with their mother, Doron, while visiting their grandmother. Their father, Yoni, recently showed us a video of them being taken captive on the 7th of October. Following their release, he said, "I'm happy that I've got my family back, but I won't celebrate until the last of the kidnapped returns." Ahad marked his 9th birthday in Gaza. He was released along with his mother, Karen, and his grandmother, Ruthie, but his grandfather, Abraham, is still being held. A relative gave his reaction to the BBC.
We couldn't believe it until we saw it with our own eyes. Them on the ambulances and on the buses making their way home. This is truly, it's very exciting. We're still scared and worried about Abraham again, but this is one step towards being happy.
Meanwhile, this is the oldest of those returning home, Yafa Adar, an 85-year-old mother of 3, grandmother to 8, and great-grandmother to 7 children. And for many other families, the day was bittersweet. Some 240 people were seized as hostages, and most remain in Gaza. Under the terms of the temporary ceasefire deal, 39 Palestinians, also women and children, were freed from Israeli jails to be reunited with their families. They were accused of a range of offences, from throwing stones to attempted murder. Some had been convicted and others held without trial. Large crowds turned out to greet those returning to the occupied West Bank at this Israeli checkpoint. One of those released was Mara Bakir. She was 16 when she was arrested 8 years ago for a knife attack on an Israeli police officer and had nearly served her sentence. She told journalists the release deal followed the deaths of many people, adding, "This makes us unhappy and uncomfortable." Like Mara, many of the prisoners had been in solitary confinement. As their coach arrived, some inside danced in celebration. Someone was wrapped in a Palestinian flag. Meanwhile, the truce is allowing the biggest influx of aid to Gaza since the war began, with more lorries lined up to carry in fuel, food, and medical supplies. Still, with a deep humanitarian crisis, the UN warns this isn't nearly enough. Today, more Israeli hostages and more Palestinian prisoners are set to be released as the pause in fighting continues. For both sides, the promise of a little more relief. Yolanda Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
And we can speak to Yolanda now, who's in Jerusalem. Morning to you, Yolanda. So we have a temporary ceasefire, we have the hostage and prisoner release. It all appears to be working. Just look ahead to the next 24 hours for us.
Yeah, I mean, so we know that already the list of Israeli hostages due to be released by Hamas from Gaza today has been handed over to Israeli security officials. They're said to be reviewing that. And with the truce sticking for the moment, we're expecting the same kind of choreography to play out as we saw yesterday during the course of today. So there should be more aid entering now through Egypt's Rafah crossing over the coming hours. Then the hostage handover involving the Red Cross in the Gaza Strip. Then the hostages brought out via Egypt as they arrive in Israel. That's when we should get movements to release Palestinians from Israeli jails. With a further kind of handover taking place involving the Red Cross there. All of this as people in Gaza continue to have this brief respite from the fighting, really. We heard yesterday from people that this was just a psychological break for them. They've been able to go back to look at some of the damage or destruction to their homes in some cases, although people are not allowed to move from the south of the Strip to the north under Israeli military orders. People have been able to seek out safer places to stay and to get food and other supplies that they need. And although both sides have said that fighting will resume once this 4-day pause is over, we did have President Biden coming out overnight, and he, of course, has been involved in this deal that was mediated by Qatar. He said there is a real chance of extending this truce.
Yolanda, for the moment, thank you very much. Time now is 6:07. Now you're picking up on events in Dublin over the past couple of days.
Yeah, a real contrast last night. A number of arrests were made in Dublin. There was no repeat, though, of Thursday night's widespread violence, which saw 500 rioters attacking shops, vehicles and police officers. Detectives are trawling through 6,000 hours of CCTV footage to identify the offenders. The disorder came after a multiple stabbing outside a school in the city. A woman and a 5-year-old girl remain critically ill. The Labour Party will be unlikely to meet its spending targets on green initiatives if it comes into government, as sources told the BBC. The party had initially pledged £28 billion a year as part of the Green Prosperity Plan, which includes increasing the number of wind farms and solar panels. A senior figure close to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the state of public finances means this target will probably not be reached. The mother of one of 4 teenage boys killed in a car crash in North Wales has paid tribute to him. Harvey Owen died alongside his friends Jevon Palace, Will Flitchett and Hugo Morris during a camping trip last weekend. In a statement, Crystal Owen said Harvey was laid back, charismatic, cheeky, creative and funny. She said he was a boy that preferred to be outside and active. He was the most gentle soul, always feeling empathy for people and seeing the good in everyone. The Metropolitan Police will hand out leaflets to protesters at pro-Palestinian marches about the use of offensive and potentially illegal words and phrases. 100,000 people are expected to attend a protest in central London today. HSBC says it's still working on getting its mobile and online banking services back up and running after customers first complained of problems yesterday morning. The company apologised for what it called an internal systems issue. Derek Chauvin, the former US police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd in Minneapolis, has reportedly been stabbed in prison. He's said to have been seriously injured. George Floyd's death in 2020 sparked a wave of protests against police brutality and racism. Efforts to free 41 construction workers stuck in a collapsed tunnel in northern India have, once again, been hampered by the failure of drilling equipment. The men have now been trapped in the Himalayan tunnel for nearly 2 weeks. Our South Asia correspondent, Samira Hussain, joins us from the scene. Samira, good morning to you, or hello to you. This is just, it almost feels tantalisingly close, yet being scuppered time and time again by technicalities, by machinery.
Absolutely. They're only about 12 meters away from reaching the men, but they keep getting stuck on other pieces of debris. Now, just to sort of make everyone understand, so this tunnel behind me, it was under construction. So it's not just rubble that they're contending with, but they're contending with other pieces of machinery that was already inside the tunnel when they were building and when it collapsed. So they have this drilling machine that comes in and drills a hole to try and reach to the trapped workers, but they sometimes get stuck on pieces of metal, and that ends up breaking blades of the drilling machine. So they've just been able to pull the machine out along with the broken blades to repair that, and separately they're going to go in manually and start breaking down some of the steel rods and steel pipes that the drilling machines keep getting stuck on. In terms of when we think that the construction workers will get out, I mean, rescue officials here say, despite only being 12 meters away, it's going to take at least a full day to repair the machines and to do what they need to do manually.
Samira, thanks so much. Okay, we'll keep watching and hoping Samira's saying that for us.
Absolutely. 11 minutes past 6 is time for you. One other story for you. What's better than one baby elephant? Well, obviously, two baby elephants.
That's Alto. Alto has given birth to twins. Now, there they are. It's really rare for elephants, apparently. Both of the babies the calves are female. They were born at the Samburu National Reserve in northern Kenya. They are African savanna elephants. They are classed as an endangered species. The baby's feeding.
Have we got sound on this? Can we hear it?
No, we haven't got sound on this. There is not really anything better than two baby elephants. Oh, have we got loads of pictures? Can we just run this for the next 4 hours? It's very good. Mind you, saying that, beautiful there, lovely. We can't bring you more baby elephants, but we can bring you Louise. That sounded really odd, actually. Louise, I'm so sorry.
From two baby elephants to one.
No, I did not mean that.
Glad I didn't say that.
I know, you're just sitting there
Those stripes are not very flattering.
Louise, what a lovely tree. Nature, yes, wonderful.
Well, actually, Naga, I've got some good news, because what's better than two baby elephants? Lots of dry, sunny, sparkling winter sunshine. Plenty of it, actually, out there today. It is going to be a beautiful day, but man, it is cold. Our first widespread frost of the winter season. Temperatures have fallen down to as low as -6 degrees. But look at the weather map. Hardly a cloud in the sky for many as we go through the day today. A little bit of fair weather cloud across the coast. We've got some pushing in off the Irish Sea as well at the moment. And the cloud across the northeast of Scotland, maybe northeast England, might just produce 1 or 2 isolated showers. But the winds are lighter, so it will feel a little better in some respects, but those temperatures are going to be slightly below the average for the time of year. So chilly afternoon with some sunshine to look forward to. Now, as we go through the night tonight, a west-east divide develops, because we will continue to see some clear skies and here temperatures just below freezing, but more cloud out to the west, so that's already lifting those temperatures. So 6 degrees down into Cornwall first thing in the morning, but unfortunately that means there's another weather front that's going to gradually be pushing in. It will bring some light showery rain on Sunday as it does so. So on the whole, it will be a sunny start across the far north and the east of Scotland. Drier but cloudy conditions across the east. That might make it a little colder, really. Some showery rain pushing into southwest England, into Wales, central southern England eventually, and of course into Northern Ireland. But look at the temperatures here, 10 to 13 degrees. Elsewhere, even under that cloud, it will feel really quite disappointing at around 6 degrees as a maximum. Now, as we move out of Sunday, that low pressure is going to drift its way steadily southward, so it will bring some showery outbreaks of rain through the night, and it may be lingering first thing on Monday morning. So it's a cloudy, murky start as that showery rain pulls away. The rest of the brightness further north and west. But some of these showers to higher ground, yes, could have a bit of a wintry flavour in there as it stays on the cold side. So 6 or 7 degrees into the north, we might just scrape double figures down into central and southern England through Monday afternoon. But the cold air is set to stay with us. So we keep the blue tones on the whole, and with weather fronts through the middle part of the week just brushing their way in, any moisture into that cold air could mean that we could see further wintry flurries, mostly to higher ground, but it's certainly worth bearing in mind we keep that cold feel, temperatures below par for the time of year. But the sun will also have some more breathing to see.
Thank you very much. We'll see you later on.
Let's take a look at the papers. It's 6:15. The freeing of some Israeli hostages dominating many of the front pages, including The Guardian, which carries a photograph of one elderly hostage being released and family members waiting anxiously in Tel Aviv to see their loved ones. The Home Secretary James Cleverly has given an interview to The Times in which he claims the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is not the be-all and end-all in terms of the government curbing immigration.
I look at the Telegraph now reporting that Sir Keir Starmer is planning to water down Labour's £28 billion Green Prosperity Fund, a plan to borrow billions to invest in environmental jobs and industry. Labour says this is an attempt by the Labour leader to prove to the British public that his party can be trusted with the economy.
Veteran campaigner and broadcaster Dame Esther Ransom is on the front page of Saturday's Daily Express. She's had an interview with the paper in which she says she treasures every single day as new treatments are holding back her stage 4 cancer. We wish her well, obviously.
On this Saturday morning at 16 minutes past 6, we hear a lot of stories about problems with the trains. Journeys that go wrong, strikes, people having problems because it costs too much. A story, and this is in the Times today, about a cuddly toy called Monkey, who's actually, who's a little monkey cuddly toy.
Is the name Monkey?
Yeah, Monkey is the name of the toy. Lost on a train journey. One of those stories.
Oh, okay.
Belonged to a family in Rutland in the East Midlands. And the toy belonged to a toddler from Bristol, now reunited. So the journey in all.
What's Rutland got to do with it?
Because they were travelling. They were visiting family in Rutland. So family were travelling on the train network.
Okay.
They're from Bristol. But when they switched trains in Birmingham, New Street Station, they lost the rucksack that the toy was in.
The monkey.
It was a small dinosaur rucksack. Monkey was inside the rucksack. Okay? Monkey was inside the rucksack, Birmingham New Street Station. They got
the
separated.
dinosaur rucksack.
Yes.
Okay.
They got separated. The alarm bells were raised, and the family, the little child, Tay, the mum says, was absolutely destroyed.
Understandably.
Monkey was gone.
And Monkey's everything.
Monkey was gone. And then started an amazing operation by train staff to get Monkey back. So they were alerted, Network Rail were alerted that Monkey had gone missing. The cross-country train that Monkey was on had left the station. Then it went 384 miles away, and then eventually, via a tortuous journey, came back to the family. So, in total, I'm working on the story. We'll get there, okay? In total, 4 train companies helped Monkey get home. He clocked up an extra 619 miles on the journey, and what would have been a 150-mile trip home to the West Coast.
Is there a map? Do we know where?
£40.
Do we know where Monkey went?
Monkey, I can tell you where Monkey went, and I can tell you're interested in the story of where Monkey went. It's growing. So Monkey started off Bristol Temple Meads, travelled to Birmingham New Street, ended up in Edinburgh.
Oh.
Came back down via Leeds to Oakham and ended up back in Bristol Temple Meads. The point being that sometimes things can happen that are good. Monkey got back home, the family was reunited. And a lot of people went to a lot of
lovely story. It's a story of collaboration.
Really, shouldn't we? It would have worked better if we had a map, like Monkey Progress.
Do you think that's what would have made that story better? 19 minutes past 6 is the time. Mike will have the sport a little later on. First, though, the COVID-19 public inquiry has had testimony this week from some of the key figures at the heart of the government's response to the pandemic.
Amongst those giving evidence were the top scientific, medical and political advisors. Our correspondent Ellie Price looks back at what they had to say and the impression it gave of the UK's leadership during that period.
It was a bit like getting the old band back together. All those scientists we got used to hearing in the pandemic.
There are some things that need to be in place.
We'd seen so much of them because of this government mantra.
We will follow the science. We'll be guided by the science, and that's why we're following the scientific advice in the way that we are.
But very quickly, the inquiry heard that became unhelpful for the scientists.
It was a millstone round our necks.
The strikers who score the wonder goals are the ones who make the headlines. Actually, the hard yards are done by the defenders and by the defensive midfielders tracking back.
His memorable metaphors made him popular, yet Professor Sir Jonathan Van Tam, JVT, told the inquiry his workload was horrendous, and so was the abuse.
I did not expect my family to be threatened with having their throats cut. I did not expect the police to have to say, will you move out in the middle of the night, or in the middle of the evening, will you move out for a few days while we look at this and potentially make some arrests? You know, we didn't move out because of the cat. As it happened, we didn't want to leave the cat.
Rishi Sunak told the Commons on Wednesday that the government always took scientific advice, but questions over his Eat Out to Help Out scheme, introduced in the summer of 2020 when he was Chancellor, kept coming.
We didn't know about it until it was announced, and I think our advice would have been very clear.
Another recurring theme was the timing of when decisions were made and whether they could have been made earlier, especially when it came to lockdown.
I've rejected and I will continue to reject your characterisation of this as overreaction, because that implies that I thought in a sense the action should not happen. What I thought should happen is that people should be aware that without action, very serious things would occur, but the downsides of those actions should be made transparent.
So a big week of science and scientists, but as ever, the politics and the role of politicians crept in too. It sets up the next few weeks rather nicely. Next week there'll be a feel of, I'm a former cabinet minister, get me out of here, with Matt Hancock due to give evidence at the end of the week. He's faced plenty of criticism already during the COVID inquiry in London.
Now, there was a time when it looked like the traditional record shop was fading into extinction. Maybe not anymore.
Older fans are reimbursing their love and vinyl. Younger fans are discovering it. And as a result, record shops are thriving.
And now HMV has reopened its flagship store on London's Oxford Street 4 years after it closed down. Very low. Let's take a look.
Back in business. For the first time since 2019, HMV's flagship store is trading again. And for the band booked for the grand reopening, it's madness.
Please get off the stop away. I think they'll be shut by about this time tomorrow. No, it's lovely. Of course it is. And it's nice to see that the shiner and all that's coming back. Of course it is. Get the shut the skylight roof. The atmosphere's been great. Yeah, you know, we've got a very good reaction to this new album. It's #1, by the way.
And how special is it to be back on the original site of the HMV?
Fantastic, yeah, because this is where we use the still records. You know, you can't do that anymore. It's all on a computer, isn't it? CCTV.
HMV has hosted the likes of Blur and David Bowie in the past. And it all began here for the Beatles some 60 years ago. Bosses here hope the return of its first ever store will not just attract those with a sense of nostalgia, but a whole new generation of customers through the door.
It's pretty busy, but I came in to look at vinyls because I have a day off school today, so it's actually really, really good to get new vinyls.
We love our music and we've finished shop many times, so yeah, good to come back.
What's it like being back inside HMV?
Absolutely fantastic. Came here years and years ago, and it's good to buy vinyl, CDs, and everything, because there's such a vinyl revival. I've actually got a record player, got all the old 80s one stuff out. It's absolutely brilliant. It's like the joy. It's shops that we need back on Oxford Street.
The midday trade is brisk and lively, and every year the demand goes up.
His Master's Voice first opened here in 1921.
It's just a question of how much can be spent this week, and then which to choose.
And has closed before due to fires and financial issues.
Ultimately, this was the first store for HMV, so to now be here, 1921, and over 100 years later, we're getting back here where so many famous people played is, it's a dream come true.
Just want you to know that this is just all a poor excuse for me to go shopping for CDs.
It's hoped the return of HMV will boost Oxford Street's fortunes.
The great thing about HMV, apart from the history, coming back to its original store, is it brings a new demographic back onto Oxford Street. It brings a sense of community. They're going to have live concerts here. So it's a whole new dynamic that we're going to have.
As for fans of physical records, this latest comeback is music to their ears.
There is something, I don't know, something reassuring about that. That's looking through records.
It's a lovely thing to do.
Lots of people remember doing that.
I do. It used to be a real treat
Yeah.
to go to the record store and just rifle through records and find something new. I can Terry Lowe reporting that.
25 is time now.
Jane, good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you for asking. I'm not Mike, but I'm Jane. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I forgot. I'm not doing well this morning. Imagine all of us are in a better state than Everton and this man having to respond to what's been happening, because Mike was reporting this last week.
Yeah, so this is the first time that the manager of Everton, Sean Dyche, has spoken about their 10-point deduction. And if you think about it, the last couple of seasons, Everton very narrowly missed out on relegation. They very narrowly escaped relegation. But this season, they were doing okay under Dyche. They were 14th. But he's just seen all of his hard work being undone. And they've dropped to 19th after losing those 10 points. And he spoke for the first time about it yesterday. And as you can imagine, he was not happy. So yes, the Premier League returns this weekend following the international break. Ahead of their game against Manchester United on Sunday, Everton manager Sean Dyche says the club feels shocked and aggrieved after receiving a record-breaking 10-point deduction for breaking financial rules. Joe Linsky has this report.
In the international break, the top flight stood still, all except for one team. A 10-point deduction took Everton from 14th to the drop. They start this weekend 2 points from safety.
Everton who win the terrific game of football.
Since their last match, the mood's changed. The punishment came from an independent commission for a breach of Premier League spending rules. Everton say they'll appeal, but a club that had been optimistic has now turned defiant.
I think, like everyone, well, certainly everyone in these parts was shocked. Disproportionate is a word that's been used by the club, and so obviously we're going to feel a bit aggrieved by that. For sure, it changed the viewpoint. It doesn't change what we're doing. In fact, it enhances what we're doing. It just means we're going to go harder for longer and stronger. This is just give us a push backwards to then come forwards again.
Last night, Everton's fans were at Premier League headquarters. Protests will go on into Sunday when they host Manchester United.
Nobody's saying that we're not guilty as a club of anything, but the points that have been taken off us is far too harsh a penalty.
I just think standing in solidarity from our football club showed that we're backing the club, backing the players. Being an Everton fan, you're not going to back down to something like this.
They do feel it's been unjust. I think they feel like it's time to stand even stronger, if you like, than ever. The way they do that is their choice. All we can ask for is their backing and support when we get in the stadium.
Everton have said they'll now closely monitor the outcomes of other cases. Those include the Premier League champions. Manchester City face more than 100 charges of breaking financial rules. They deny them all, and the case is still ongoing. Their coach is clear this is no time for comparisons.
It's two completely different cases. But completely. I know with the people like saying, okay, what City, why don't go to the conference? Wait. Wait. And after, what's going to happen is going to happen.
Everton have had 10 points taken off them and yet can still look upwards. A win on Sunday could lift them out the bottom three. Their punishment sets a precedent that could change the landscape of this league. Today, the top flight resumes after a break like none before. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Well, Manchester City are first up in the Premier League later. They host Liverpool in the lunchtime kickoff in a game which is arguably one of the season's most eagerly anticipated. A win for Jurgen Klopp's side over the current leaders would take them back to the top for the first time since May 2022.
If we can be really uncomfortable for them, then we have a chance. If they feel comfortable in their game, there's no team who can beat them. But if we can change that, then there's a chance, and we have to take it.
Now, Harry Kane got on the score sheet again for Bayern Munich last night. Isn't he doing well? His brilliant form continues. The England captain scored a goal in a 1-0 win over Cologne as the German champions moved top of the league. Well, this rebound from Kane was his 18th goal in 12 games. He's also the first English player to score 18 times in one season in the Bundesliga. The win leaves the German champions on 32 points, one clear of second-placed Bayer Leverkusen, who play later today. Katie Taylor says she has never felt more motivated as she tries to regain the world light welterweight title later. She suffered the first defeat of her career in May to England's Chantel Cameron. Taylor is going to be in the unusual position of underdog as she heads into the ring in front of her home city fans. Now, the weigh-in followed rioting in Dublin after 3 children and a woman were stabbed in the city. However, promoter Eddie Hearn insists the fight isn't under threat.
All of our security measures will be consulted with the authorities and the police, as they have been for the whole period. And as I said, the measures that are already in place are well beyond that of a normal event. But obviously, if we have to, it's not a problem also. So, if there is a conversation to be had, it will be had. But at the moment, everybody comfortable with the measures in place and ready to move forward with the event.
To Formula One now, and Charles Leclerc is the man to catch ahead of qualifying later for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, final race of the season. Friday's second practice had to be shortened to 20 minutes after his Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz lost control in turn 3, and Haas driver Nico Hülkenberg also crashed. Leclerc was fastest ahead of Lando Norris, with world champion Max Verstappen third. Mercedes, though, continued to struggle. Lewis Hamilton was 8th fastest behind teammate George Russell. And the UK Snooker Championship gets underway this lunchtime in York, with Mark Allen opening the defence of his title against China's Ding Junhui. The match will be a repeat of last year's final. The Northern Irishman is in good form after winning the Champion of Champions tournament last week. However, along with Ronnie O'Sullivan, Allen has been in the headlines after criticising the World Snooker Tour. He said the game was in disarray, but has since apologised for his comments.
Probably scares a few players, to be honest. Maybe thinking that I don't want to get into trouble if Mark or Ronnie are getting into trouble for things they've said, but I think it's important for the players to have a voice too. I think there has to be a balance, and that's something I'll be discussing this week with WSD.
Sale are top of the Rugby Premiership after a narrow 11 points to 9 victory over Bath last night, courtesy of a late George Ford penalty. Elsewhere, Northampton Saints edged past Harlequins. Ollie Slight home with a couple of tries for Saints, including this crucial score late on, and that means that they move level on points with Quins around 3rd place. 2 matches today as Gloucester host Leicester, while Bristol travel to inform Saracens. And that's your sport.
Lots going on. Jane, thanks very much.
So you might know by now it's a pretty big day for Doctor Who fans.
The first of 3 special episodes will be on BBC One this morning. It marks 6 decades of time-travelling entertainment.
The Time Lord is particularly popular in Cardiff, of course, where the show has been made since 2005.
And since then, it's brought an estimated £130 million to the area. Our reporter Hugh Thomas takes a look.
On a big day for the Doctor, what does this TV series mean for Wales? It's been made here since 2005 and has been a soaraway success with audiences and a Welsh drama production sector that has swelled as a result. The 2 women behind the relaunch almost 20 years ago are now making Doctor Who at their independent production company Bad Wolf in Cardiff. Bringing the Time Lord and the TARDIS to town could have been a risk, but was it?
Well, you call it a risk. I call it a leap of faith, or a bloody-minded determination that this is what we're going to do. I never felt it was a risk to bring back Doctor Who. I thought that that's what I have been waiting to do for many years.
Cardiff quickly became a backdrop for a succession of new Doctors, including Jodie Whittaker, and it's estimated to have contributed over £134 million to the Welsh economy. But alongside it, other dramas like Casualty came, creating a sustainable industry where producers suddenly found that Wales had the crews and resources they needed. Doctor Who's backers had faith from the start.
We've always believed the crews are here, the locations are here, the infrastructure's here. It's a place of endless possibility.
The study into Doctor Who's economic impact found that other big productions trusted Wales to deliver what was required, and the sector now provides employment in high-end TV jobs that were previously quite rare. It's helped by a push from the big broadcasters to make more shows outside London.
People are scrabbling about to make sure that they are the ones that are in Wales. I think people have grown with Doctor Who, and there's been so much investment in that talent. They've now become the best in the business. I guess the challenge now would be to make sure that we can continue to supply the demand.
This is a grenade simulator, so imagine someone's thrown a grenade.
There's a big supply chain feeding Doctor Who. Danny Hargreaves worked for the show at the beginning before setting up his own special effects business.
3, 2, 1. People don't realise how much of an impact Doctor Who, what it created for the industry in Wales, and it was really the catalyst of what is an exceptional industry here. And many different productions all over the world have filmed here since, and there's so many talented people, so many technicians, hair and makeup, costume, even technical people as well. There's a real thriving industry here in Wales.
Bringing the Doctor to Cardiff was one of the magic ingredients that allowed the series to soar, according to its Welsh writer.
It was very exciting for me to go to Cardiff. I'm a Swansea boy. I've always worked in the regions. I've never lived and worked in London, never. And I have a great passionate believer. I've lived in Manchester for many years. I've been queer as folk there. Done tons of dramas there with the Manchester flavour to it. But I'm fundamentally Welsh. So to bring it here was a great opportunity. I think if they asked me to make Doctor Who in London, I would have
Doctor! Not many shows can run for 60 years, even if reinvention is a regular part of the storyline. There's a celebration in Cardiff today as Doctor Who continues to make its mark on audiences and the Welsh economy.
Hughie Thomas reporting there, and of course it's on the BBC One at 6:30 this evening.
We'll be back with the headlines at 7.
Now it's time for Behind the Stories. This week, the BBC's international editor, Jeremy Byrne, talks about reporting from the front line of the Israel-Gaza conflict. Understandably, this programme will contain scenes that some viewers may find upsetting.
Okay. When I get scared, I've covered many wars over many years. What we were seeing was an absolutely enormous story. I think someone who spent many years going to tough stories around the world, if they say they haven't been affected by it, they're not telling the truth. Jeremy Byrne, I'm the international editor of BBC News. I joined the BBC on September the 24th, 1984.
Jeremy Byrne explains. Airships, blimps as they're known, seem to be coming back into fashion.
And 2005, I got the job of Middle East editor. And in a way, I'm still Middle East editor, but I'm also international editor.
Where were you on October the 7th?
Well, I woke up that morning in Kyiv, in Ukraine. I woke up and, reached my phone to see what had been going on in the world. And the first thing I saw on WhatsApp was a message to the Jerusalem WhatsApp group chat saying something incredible is happening. At that time, what it was hundreds and hundreds of rockets being fired into Israel. So subsequently transpired that was, and very quickly, it became clear that Hamas had crossed the border, was in Israel. Videos started emerging of dead soldiers, dead civilians. So very quickly, we decided, and I spoke to the people here in London, that we needed to change plans. We immediately started packing, making plans. We managed to get going by about midday. Before I left, I did some live from the roof of the Hyatt Regency Hotel in the pouring rain, talking about what was going on. They wanted me to talk about it. It was already clear that what we were seeing was an absolutely enormous story.
Let's talk to our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, who joins us this morning live from Kyiv. And
Jeremy, you know this region well. What's your assessment of what's going on right now?
What's going on is really unprecedented in terms of the actions that Hamas have taken against Israel, and I think that Israel may well now be planning an unprecedented response. I was away from home, from leaving Ukraine, I was away for 6 weeks. No, I don't get scared. I've covered many wars over many years, and in some of them there are moments where you get very scared if something suddenly flares up. You're suddenly face to face with some madman at a roadblock who's armed to the teeth, or there's an explosion very close to you, but no, I didn't think this was going to be something that would be directed at me. I didn't think that I was going to be in any serious danger.
They came in on those bikes
very early on. We were able to get to the two of the border communities, kibbutzim. The first few days of war, this small Israeli community called Kfar Aza are a microcosm of Israel's trauma and a glimpse of what might come next. There had been a wholesale slaughter, people came through the wire. And the body's still there. We went with the Israeli military, and when we arrived there, they were still clearing the area. There was shooting going on. There were hundreds of troops around the place, in sort of fighting positions. And they were taking out bodies of Israelis, in body bags, quite reverentially. The dead Hamas were lying where they were killed. A lot of them were there for some days. Started rotting, was stinking.
Most people would find that absolutely life-changing to witness something like that. How do you deal with it?
It sounds horrible. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to sound. I'm not dismissing anything. But I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've seen a lot of things. To give you an example, the 91 Gulf War, I was in Baghdad, the Americans blew up an air raid shelter. They killed, I think, more than 400 civilians in one go.
The bomb or missile went through a reinforced concrete roof at least a yard thick. The Iraqis say the attack happened at about 4 o'clock this morning.
I saw them pulling out the bodies, and I saw them put the bodies. The roof was full of there were bodies on the steps of the lecture theatre. There were bodies in the corridor. We had to step over them to go filming. I personally find much more affecting on an emotional level, and I'm quite an emotional person, very much more, my friends would probably say. I'm much more affected by people who are alive than people who are dead. You can do nothing for a dead person. But if you see a situation where someone's trying to some poor kid whose parents are killed, or some parents whose kid is killed, or people who've had their house destroyed in front of them, or they've lost everything they've ever worked for. And we turn up there at that moment as reporters, news teams, and it's inherently a very intrusive process.
Let's just talk about that trip to the kibbutz. Like you said, you were there with the IDF, and they gave you access to that story.
Yeah, we never got in without the Israeli army, without the Israeli Defense Forces.
How can you be properly objective if you're reliant on the Israeli military for? There's no way you can even be there without.
Well, the choice is either you cooperate with the military, or you don't see it. You don't get it. It was a closed military area. There were roadblocks with combat soldiers and police armed to the teeth, and because they were still getting reports of Hamas gunmen on the loose, they were extremely jumpy. There's no way you get through it, so you have to go with the military.
Are you comfortable with that relationship?
I think it's doing a choice. I mean, the ideal thing, of course, would be to just bowl up there in your own car, but sadly, the world doesn't work like that.
Did they censor your material?
The only time that I agreed to anything like that, and you have to do it, you wanted to be part of it, was when we went into Gaza with the Israeli army. They're moving in as the war approaches the critical point. their colleagues already inside the strip have surrounded Gaza City. They sent over quite a long document allowing them to tick boxes and sign things. And first of all, it was an indemnity. I have to say that if I got killed, it wasn't their fault. Or we would not sue them, the BBC, in any court of law in the world. And I also had to promise to do certain things. The main thing was about giving away their position. And with any military force I've ever been around, we never try and give away their positions, even if it's, a bunch of guerrillas somewhere in the jungle or big organized standing army, because that's not the right thing to do. It's not our job to put people in danger. So I agreed not to show the location, which meant no big wide shots for television, no specific identity about where we are.
Okay. Yeah. There's still firing in this area. It's not.
Did you ever take anything out on the orders of a censor, or did you change a script, or is there anything that you would have said to the audience that you changed or didn't say because of censorship?
We didn't get some of the kinds of shots we might have got. You go to an area and it's completely destroyed. Everything was destroyed. The classic thing you do when you're at news gathering is to go to a high building, get as far, close to the top as you could, get a great big wide shot to show scale and position. We agreed not to do that. But I will absolutely say we didn't take anything out at their request because they didn't ask us to. And I didn't play them my commentary. They didn't know what it was, the script. And I wouldn't anyway have given them any kind of editorial right of detail over it. We got out of the back of an armoured vehicle and walked into a wasteland. After a month of airstrikes and more than a week of tanks and troops, every building I saw was damaged or destroyed. I absolutely would not try to cover things in a certain way in the hope of currying favour or being asked again, being invited. The BBC is not very popular in Israel for a whole range of reasons. And I don't know, I was never tempted to try and get into anybody's good books by saying the kinds of things they wanted us to say.
How dependent are you on your crew?
I went over there with Fred Scott, who is a veteran man, officer, Jackie Long, very experienced, brilliant at what she does. And then when she had to go back to for a while, so Sam Gurngold took over. He was also a very, very good producer. He works in the Washington office. And as well as that, was a very good Israeli freelance producer, who again I've worked with a lot over the years, on Rosenfeld, and who's got lots of connections. So it is all about the team. I could not do anything on my own.
You put an image on Instagram, I think, with a coffee pot, saying this is the friend of the foreign correspondent. Those little human pleasantries, is that an important part of trying to stay sane on the road?
So I'm very, very excellent. I have an addiction to a certain kind of South African tea called Rooibos. So I have many Rooibos tea bags, and I drink all of that when we're editing. I have this plug-in espresso machine, which at the beginning of the day, my day would start with the Today program. I wouldn't be too obscenely early because it's 2 hours ahead of it. But I had to get across what was going on in the news. So I'm looking at all of this, and I'm drinking my coffee. So I'm coffee having. So yeah, you've got to have your beautiful.
BBC does not call Hamas a terrorist organisation.
No. Though we have started saying in intros using this formula, which is
Hamas, a group which is designated as a terrorist organization
by many Western governments, including the UK. I think it's exactly the right position. I'm not just saying that because I work for the BBC and I want to continue working for them. the word terrorism, it's a very loaded word. There aren't agreed definitions of who's a terrorist and who isn't a terrorist. And we do not want to get involved in this loaded discussion. It is far better to describe what people do. Yes, we don't ban the word. People want to use it themselves, or I've quoted people saying that they're terrorists. I think that's fine doing it the way that we do. I think it works very, very effectively. And, it's very important in our business not to take sides. And the thing at the moment out there is there are Israelis and Palestinians who are in so much, psychic pain, existential pain. What they want, both sides, is sympathy, support. They want their victimhood to be very strongly recognized. They want us to take sides in one or the other. They're not very interested in what the BBC would call impartial reporting, because sometimes impartial reporting contains things which are uncomfortable to hear. And people don't want a time like this. They want comfort. They want support. They want a cheerleader.
The missile hit the hospital long after dark. You can hear the impact.
I've got to ask you about the hospital on 17th of October.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The BBC was criticised heavily for its reporting of that event. Tell us what happened that night, and bluntly, how did you get your information, and do you regret anything that you said that night?
So it broke in, I suppose, mid-evening. And to answer your question, no, I don't regret because I think it was measured throughout. I didn't make the judgment.
But you said that building had been flattened.
Oh yeah, well I got that wrong because I was looking at the pictures, and what I could see was a square that appeared to be flaming on all sides, and there was a sort of a void in the middle, and I think it was a picture taken from a drone, and so we have to piece together what we see, and I thought, well, that looks like our building's gone. And that was my conclusion from looking at the pictures, and I was wrong on that. But I don't feel pretty bad. If we were allowed in to report it ourselves, if the Israelis open the borders, they have another war. They said, all right, guys, you want to go in? It's like that, up to you. Dangerous, okay. So if you want to do it, you can. They wanted to control the media war, as I'm sure Hamas will. So because we're not in there, we have to rely on things people say. We have to try and weigh up what's said. We look at the multiplicity of video that comes out, and using our try and work out how that. And if you work the end of it, I'll tell you they have very some people don't get 100% right.
You have a huge responsibility in these times as the BBC. Your listeners are dependent on you to get this information. And when you, for several hours, were broadcasting an Israeli strike on a hospital, you were doing them a huge disservice.
I have on one or two occasions gone a bit further than just simply reporting what's going on. I've commented on some of the criticisms that is being made of our reporting. For the record, I think that Colonel Lerner, who I know well, is on this occasion mischaracterizing what it was that we were saying on air. I think that in my position with the word editor in my job title, that's part of it in a sense, and I'm proud of what we do, so I feel fine defending it. I think, in fact, it's very important that we defend it because, we don't, who the hell is? We don't have a political agenda. There's a truth agenda at the BBC. And that's the difference between what we do and what some other people do. So, yeah, sometimes I'm very happy to stand up for it. I always will. A car park outside the Al Ahly hospital became a killing ground. The arguments about who's responsible come too late for the people whose lives ended here. Even with their bodies taken away, the cleanup this morning also meant collecting small pieces of flesh.
Do we show too much or too little brutality, do you think?
Too little.
Why?
Well, because I think we have a tendency to try and spare people's feelings, and I think sometimes that creeps into sanitizing the news. There's loads of things I would not show. The effect of the way that high explosive can blow a body to pieces. I wouldn't show that. But equally, at times, the world's horrible. And if we're in the news business, it's the truth business, so show the truth. Hang on. I think talking about things is very important. I've had my share of mental health problems over the years. Just stop for a minute, actually, particularly after a very good colleague, a friend of mine, was killed by the Israelis when I was working with him in 2000.
The Israeli army has admitted it made a tragic mistake in killing a BBC driver in southern Lebanon last month.
I was very close to where it happened, and they tried to kill me and the cameraman as well at the same time. It destroyed our car and killed the driver, the BBC's Abed Taoush. Abed! Oh my God. Can't do things like that without some kind of consequences. I would say, talking about things at the time, I think someone who spent going to many stories around the very happy people. They're not amazing person I have in many ways. The professional experiences you have in your job influence the person you are and the person you become. I think mentally I'm in a very good place these days. I'm very positive. My glass is half full, not half empty. Some is more than half full. For me, I think that's related to the fact that I've had cancer and I don't have it anymore. Fingers crossed. That's good.
There is a reason why you're here to talk about bowel cancer, just to tell people.
Yeah, because I was diagnosed with it last October. I had some funny pains in my legs and my back when I was in Iraq last May. I think that if you're faced with a serious illness or a big problem, which for once isn't work-related, then, yeah, I mean, you get a broader perspective on life and importance of trying to enjoy, live in the moment. Human beings always get caught up in, people so disparagingly say, oh, first world problems. But actually, people care about what they do and they want things to go well, get annoyed if they don't. But no, it's just for me, myself, it just rearranged a few things in my mind, in my head.
When you come back, what do you do?
Well, I'd like to be at home now, but I've come to talk to you, actually. And after that, I like to go home, relax, see my family. My kids are away, and my partner, the dog. The dog is very happy to see me when I come back every time. Relax a bit, yeah.
Simple things, nothing massively complicated.
No, not for me.
Sometimes I think there's something missing. Like I had something lovely, and it's gone.
Your mother's friend called Donna Noble. If she remembered that she would die.
We've got a Martian in the shed!
interesting, but if this thing exists, it is heading for Domino. I don't know if I could save your life this time.
New Doctor Who starts tonight at 6:30 on BBC One.
Today, free at last. The Israeli hostages released by Hamas spend their first night back with their families.
Palestinian prisoners have also been freed as part of a deal that sees a 4-day pause in fighting, allowing much-needed aid to get into Gaza.
Calm in Dublin overnight as a heavy police presence prevents a second evening of rioting in the city.
I'm in Wales with a mother, Emma Webb, who is walking 158 miles to London in memory of her daughter, Brodie, who took her life. Emma's going to be pulling her resin horse miles all that way.
Good morning. Everton's manager says he's shocked at their 10-point deduction. Sean Dyche called it disproportionate and said the club would appeal. He was speaking for the first time since the punishment for financial breaches.
Good morning. It is a cold and frosty Saturday for all of us this morning, but at least there will be some beautiful sparkling winter sunshine out there. Yes, it's going to stay dry and settle for
Is it
most.
Saturday?
It will be rather cold.
Fucking hell, I don't even know.
Coming up shortly.
Yeah, it's Saturday. It's Saturday, fuck's sake.
Good morning, it's Saturday the 25th of November. Our main story this morning, 24 hours into a 4-day temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The peace appears to be holding after hostages and prisoners were exchanged. Further releases and the delivery of humanitarian aid will continue today.
13 Israeli women and children and 11 foreign workers were the hostages released from Gaza yesterday. 39 Palestinians were released from Israeli jails in a deal brokered by Qatar. Our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Nell, reports on a rare moment of hope in the conflict.
An arrival to celebrate at this Israeli children's hospital, as many of the freed Israeli hostages were flown in last night, much to the relief and happiness of a crowd of well-wishers. The women and children were said to be physically well. Altogether, 13 Israelis were released after they spent almost 7 weeks being held captive by Hamas in Gaza, along with 11 foreign workers. Earlier video released by the military wing of Hamas shows the moment they were taken to vehicles belonging to the International Committee of the Red Cross. These are the youngest of the hostages, Aviv, who's 2, and her sister Raz, who's 4, shown in a family video. They were snatched by Hamas gunmen with their mother, Doron, while visiting their grandmother. Their father, Yoni, recently showed us a video of them being taken captive on the 7th of October. Following their release, he said, "I'm happy that I've got my family back, but I won't celebrate until the last of the kidnapped returns." Ahad marked his 9th birthday in Gaza. He was released along with his mother, Karen, and his grandmother, Ruthie, but his grandfather, Avraham, is still being held. A relative gave his reaction to the BBC.
We couldn't believe it until we saw it with our own eyes. Them on the ambulances and on the buses making their way home. This is truly, well, it's very exciting. We're still scared and worried about Avraham again, but this is one step towards being happy.
Meanwhile, this is the oldest of those returning home, Yafa Adar, an 85-year-old mother of 3, grandmother to 8, and great-grandmother to 7 children. And for many other families, the day was bittersweet. Some 240 people were seized as hostages, and most remain in Gaza. Under the terms of the temporary ceasefire deal, 39 Palestinians, also women and children, were freed from Israeli jails to be reunited with their families. They were accused of a range of offences, from throwing stones to attempted murder. Some had been convicted and others held without trial. Large crowds turned out to greet those returning to the occupied West Bank at this Israeli checkpoint. One of those released was Mara Bakir. She was 16 when she was arrested 8 years ago for a knife attack on an Israeli police officer and had nearly served her sentence. She told journalists the release deal followed the deaths of many people, adding, "This makes us unhappy and uncomfortable." Like Mara, many of the prisoners had been in solitary confinement. As their coach arrived, some inside danced in celebration. Someone was wrapped in a Palestinian flag. Meanwhile, the truce is allowing the biggest influx of aid to Gaza since the war began, with more lorries lined up to carry in fuel, food and medical supplies. Still, with a deep humanitarian crisis, the UN warns this isn't nearly enough. Today, more Israeli hostages and more Palestinian prisoners are set to be released as the pause in fighting continues. For both sides, the promise of a little more relief. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
And let's speak to Yolande now. Morning to you, Yolande. So we're 24 hours in. We have the temporary ceasefire in place and appears to be working. We've had hostages and prisoners exchanged. Just look ahead from where we are now.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, already what we've had today is the list of hostages expected to be released by Hamas, handed over to Israeli security officials. They're said to be reviewing that. And really, with the truce sticking in Gaza, we're expecting the same kind of choreography over the coming days. So, again, hostages to be handed over in a hour's time to Egypt. And then the moment they're on Israeli territory, that really clears the way for a further release of Palestinian prisoners, and their names should be handed to Palestinian officials during the course of the day. Of course, for people in Gaza, they're seeing now a big influx in aid going in. That should be able to continue through the day. People have been telling us how they feel this also just gives them a kind of psychological break after 7 weeks of such intense fighting. People have been able to go and return to see whether their homes have been destroyed or damaged. They've been able to get the supplies that they need, food and some of the real basics. Now, worryingly, of course, both sides have said that fighting will resume once this truce is over. But we did have some positive comments from President Biden overnight. He's involved in getting this deal set up with Qatari mediation. And he said it's only a start, but so far it's gone well. And he raised the hope of an extension to the pause in fighting.
Yolande, thank you very much. Time now is 7 minutes past 7. Nag is going to pick up with events in Dublin and real focus there and concern about events happening during the week.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a number of arrests which were made in Dublin overnight, but no repeat of Thursday night's widespread violence. That saw 500 rioters attacking shops, vehicles and police officers. Let's talk to our correspondent, Thomas Morgan, who's in Dublin for us. Thomas, so a calmer night. Many people would be grateful for that. There are still the issues that were behind the first night of disruption that are still a concern.
Yeah, many people talking about, was that a watershed moment? Was that something that Ireland needs to look at itself for now? Really, the Prime Minister had said that those people that involved in the riot, they brought shame on Ireland. I think what he was talking about was some of the group that started it, they had some possible far-right ideology. There had been possibly some misinformation, rumours on social media about the background of the suspect involved in that original stabbing, because you must remember, of course, this all happened. This all started really on Thursday afternoon about 1:30 when an individual outside of school stabbed 5 people. There's a 5-year-old still in a critical condition, as well as a school care assistant. Another 2 children are also ill at the moment. After that, rumours swirled on social media about the background of that suspect, rumours that he had come from overseas. And that spiraled then, and we saw the violence that we saw actually on Thursday night in the city centre. Now, we do know the background here. The Irish police, the Garda, they have said that the individual, the suspect, is 40 years old, is an Irish citizen, and has lived here for 20 years. We have no more details, and they're still investigating the motives behind that attack. But there was also the investigation into the violence. Now, as well as the Garda here blaming it on far-right hooliganism, there were some opportunists that took advantage of the situation and were looting shops and breaking things as well. So there are 2 things at play here. But certainly, for the time that I've been here, speaking to people that are from Dublin, living here, they were telling me that there was possibly these things rumbling in the background, that possibly the police weren't taking things seriously enough, and at some stage something was going to happen, and we did see that on Thursday night.
Tomas, thanks for taking us through all of that. Tomas Morgan there in Dublin. The Home Secretary James Cleverly has said the government's plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda is not the be-all and end-all. The plan was ruled as unlawful by the Supreme Court last week. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Charlotte Rose. Charlotte, interesting these comments coming through from the Home Secretary. And I suppose it's always worth putting into context just how much of an impact the Rwanda plan, if it had been successful, would have made.
Morning, Naga. Well, it certainly seems to be some kind of shift in tone, and I guess in some ways that's no surprise because, of course, just 10 days ago, as you say, the government did lose that court case when the Supreme Court ruled that the policy is unlawful. Now, it has to be said that it was always going to be a relatively small number of people who were ever sent to Rwanda as part of this policy, but the government did hope that it would have a strong deterrent effect on the number of people planning to make channel crossings. So I guess no surprise in this interview in the Times, James Cleverly is suggesting that it's not the be-all and end-all, but it's always been part of a wider suite of measures, and saying that people shouldn't fixate on the methods of doing this, but focus on the mission, which is, of course, the one the government has set out of stopping the boats. Now, you could see this as well as a bit of a response to his predecessor, Suella Braverman. Viewers might remember her final parting shot when she was sacked as Home Secretary was to say that the government has no plan B if the Rwanda policy didn't work out. Now, James Cleverly clearly here trying to say, well, the government does have a plan B. It's got wider plans to stop illegal migration, including the deal it's done with Albania to improve returns, and that has stopped 90% of Albanian migrants from coming to the UK in small boats. It's also got work that it's been doing with France over the past few years. So James Cleverly clearly saying, well, this is the Rwanda policy is one way of dealing with the situation, but there are other plans as well. I think it also suggests that his belief, he's obviously in a situation and thinking that this is unlikely to change possibly before the next election, whatever work the government is doing to try and make the policy a reality. And therefore, despite the plans that the government has to introduce emergency legislation to override some of what the Supreme Court has said, he's trying to downplay expectations.
Charlotte, thanks very much. Charlotte Rose there for us. The Labour Party will be unlikely to meet its spending targets on green initiatives if it comes into government, a source has told the BBC. The party had initially pledged £28 billion a year as part of the Green Prosperity Plan, which includes increasing the number of wind farms and solar panels. A senior figure close to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the state of public finances means this target will probably not be reached. The mother of one of the 4 teenage boys killed in a car crash in North Wales has paid tribute to him. Harvey Owen died alongside his friends Jevon Hurst, Will Flitchett and Hugo Morris during a camping trip last weekend. In a statement, Crystal Owen said Harvey was laid back, charismatic, cheeky, creative and funny. She said he was a boy that preferred to be outside and active. He was the most gentle soul, always feeling empathy for people and seeing the good in everyone. The Metropolitan Police will hand out leaflets to protesters at pro-Palestinian marches about the use of offensive and potentially illegal words and phrases. 100,000 people are expected to attend a protest in central London today. HSBC says it's still working on getting its mobile and online banking services back up and running after customers first complained of problems yesterday morning. The company has apologised for what it called an internal systems issue. Derek Chauvin, the former US police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd in Minneapolis, has reportedly been stabbed in prison. He's said to have been seriously injured. George Floyd's death in 2020 sparked a wave of protests against police brutality and racism. Now, efforts to free 41 construction workers who are stuck in a collapsed tunnel in northern India have once again been hampered by the failure of drilling equipment. The men have now been trapped in the Himalayan tunnel for nearly 2 weeks. Our South Asia correspondent, Samira Hussain, is at the scene. Samira, just so close. We've been talking to you about this, and it's been seeming that it's so close, yet it keeps on being hampered, this rescue operation.
Megan, when we got here on Wednesday, there was an incredible amount of optimism that they were just a few hours away from rescuing those 41 construction workers. But since then, they have run into so many difficulties. And the biggest reason being is that
remember, this construction site, I mean, it was a tunnel that's being constructed. So inside the mouth of the tunnel that you can see behind me was a lot of construction material, as well as all of the rubble and debris that they're dealing with. So every time the drilling machine starts going forward and drilling, it will get stuck on pieces of metal and steel. And that's what's happened now. So they pulled out the drilling machine, and now they're involved in fixing that. The other thing that they have to do is now go in manually to try and break down some of the metal and steel that's blocking the access to those workers. Remember, there only about 12 meters to go before they reach the trapped construction workers. And everyone here is very eager for them to come out. Mostly, of course, the friends and families that have gathered here. But the big question, of course, is when exactly officials think that that is going to happen. And right now they're saying that those rescue efforts are going to be halted while they're dealing with these mechanical issues.
Samira, thanks very much for taking us through that. Samira Hussain there for us.
Time is 7:16 on a Saturday morning, and I'll be thinking, Louise, I'll be thinking pretty nippy this morning. Would I be right?
You will be very right, actually, Charlie. I just want to show you the comparison between Friday morning, where temperatures around 6 to 8 degrees for many of us. Look at this morning, cold and frosty. Our first widespread frost of the winter. Temperatures in Oxfordshire down as low as -7 degrees. But hopefully the compensation will be the sparkling winter sunshine that most of us are likely to see. The winds are light for most, but still coming from a northerly direction, running down through the North Sea. We might just see 1 or 2 isolated showers here. And a little more in the way of cloud through the Irish Sea, just lapping onto the west coast as well. But generally speaking, it's dry, settled and sunny for most. But it's not particularly warm. It's going to take a while for those temperatures to recover. They will do so. But maximum temperatures generally around 6 or 7 degrees. So that's below par for here at this time of year. 9 degrees in the southwest. The reason for that is some clouds starting to spill in. And through the evening, we'll see a weak weather front arriving as it does so. It's going to bring this cloud into the west, so that'll hold the temperatures up. But further east, with some clearing skies, we might see temperatures down to -1. So not quite as cold a start tomorrow. But unfortunately, not quite as sparkling, because our low pressure will bring in these frontal systems and they'll bring outbreaks of showery rain with it from the west, taking its time. So rain into Northern Ireland, across northwest England, Wales, eventually moving towards the Midlands and southwest England through the day, clouding over a rather grey afternoon, which will make it feel quite dismal, I suspect. The best of any breaks in the clouds up into the far northeast of Scotland, but still with those temperatures around 5 or 6 degrees, and you haven't got the sunshine to go with it. Might be a bit grey and gloomy Sunday afternoon. 10 to 13 though, out to the west where that rain is sitting. Now that front will slide its way slowly southeast during Monday, so that means a contrast on Monday. There will be some rain around, so not a particularly nice day, I don't think, for England and Wales, with the showery rain drifts its way steadily south. We will see some sunny spells developing across Scotland, Northern Ireland, late on in the day across Northern England, with a scattering of showers, and some of these showers could be wintry to higher ground. So top temperatures again, generally around 6 to 9 degrees, maybe 10 to 12 down into the far southwest. But on the whole, this cold theme stays with us as we move into the week ahead. And any frontal systems that we will get, potentially through the middle part of the week, going to bring some rain and possibly to higher ground, might bring a little bit of winteriness. Look at Inverness Friday and Saturday. There's a potential here for some snow. But generally speaking, for most of us, temperatures a little bit subdued, really, for the last few days of November, and it will feel pretty miserable when it rains.
Well, we are near the end of November. It's flowing. Louise, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to tell you about a rather unusual challenge, also a labour of love.
Emma Webb is walking 155 miles in memory of her daughter, Brodie. Brodie took her own life at the age of 16.
And that's not tough enough. She'll be doing it while pulling a life-size model of a horse, because Brodie was a talented rider.
Our reporter Fee Landon is with Emma now in Chepstow. Chilly morning, Fee, very chilly morning, but hopefully things will be recognised. I know what Emma's trying to do is to raise awareness.
Absolutely. Good morning, lads. Yes, it is chilly, but we can at least it's not raining as Emma starts her challenge. As you said, Emma is off to London, 158 miles, but she will not be alone. She is taking this mannequin, life-size plastic resin horse to London. He's about 5 stone, 35 kilos, actually 9 miles. She's pulling him the whole way. Some might say it's a rather extraordinary challenge. It's rather unusual, but above all, it's extremely brave because Emma lost her daughter, Brodie. Brodie took her own life 3 years ago, and Emma has been telling me all about Brodie.
She was my absolute world. She's what I lived for. We just spent so much time together, incredibly close, more like sisters than mum and daughter, really. It worked, you know, we loved being with her company. She used to love being with me, I used to love being with her.
Brodie was 16 and 3 months. A straight-A student, a rising star of the show-jumping world, who spent every spare minute with her beloved horse, Archie.
Brodie started like any other normal day, really. I said to her in the car, I said, oh, your hair's a bit greasy, you need to wash your hair tonight. And she said, oh, I will, Mum, I'll wash it tonight. And she always used to blow me a kiss and mouth, I love you, as she walked over the road. And that was no different.
After GCSE revision session at school, they drove to the stables.
When we got to the yard then, she got out to brush Archie and tack him up, and she went out to exercise him in the arena. I had a little peep around the corner and I could see that she looked in distress really, and she was galloping around the arena on Archie. And then I knew she could have slowed down, but she just said she couldn't. And I said, look, come on, cool him off now. And I started to look at the stable and just thought that she was a long time putting him on the horse walker to cool off.
And when you couldn't find her in the stable, then did you realise something was really wrong?
I just remember being in just dismay and heartbreak. I remember that thinking I knew that something was just tragically wrong. She just would have never gone off like that. You just can't make sense of it. There is no sense. It's just, you know, I just find myself trying to get through each day.
"18 months later, Emma started walking. First across Wales to raise awareness of suicide prevention, then with Mike, Tim and Andy of Three Dads Walking.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi. Emma's in Newport.
Yay! Now good friends who've supported and inspired today's challenge.
Very rainy, very miserable, but we're looking bright. See you.
Emma will pull miles. The 35-kilogram resin horse, 157 miles to London. Her route careful to avoid any sharp turns, stiles or bridges.
If I walk on my own, you know, that's not really going to make an impact. What's going to make a big impact? Make people think, well, what on earth is she doing pulling that plastic horse along? So I thought, yeah, that's what it came to me. I thought, right, I'll get a mannequin, and a real size mannequin, and I'll pull the horse all the way to London.
I'm training again today with my buddy Tina. And Miles, of course, who wouldn't leave him home.
And what would Brodie say about your latest challenge, pulling miles?
She'd probably think I'm quite crazy my next mission and my fundraising, but yeah, no, I think she would be proud. I hope she would be proud of me.
Emma hopes to raise money and encourage young people to talk about how they're really doing.
You feel like you're not a mum anymore, that you've just got all this love inside you and it's stuck with nowhere to go because you've lost your everything. My purpose is to help raise awareness in a positive way to make me still feel like I can love Brodie and that I can help others.
And help others is what Emma is all about. Well, as you can see, she has a group of supporters. I'm sure that group will be growing because she doesn't leave for a couple of hours Emma, just first of all, how are you? How are you doing this morning? Because you just gave such an amazing interview. How are you doing?
I'm a little bit tired from all the preparation and obviously a little bit cold this morning, but I'm good. I'm ready for the challenge. We're raring to go. So yeah, all good.
And just talk us through the route, because you're starting from Chepstow and you're crossing across into England,
and then we sort of go Bath, Bristol, then on into London.
158 miles.
Yeah.
How heavy is this?
Yeah, not too bad, but once you're putting in for a while, then that's when you start to get, a bit of fatigue, and it does get hard after a while, especially going uphill.
And talk us through, you've got Rosette. What are these for? You're hoping that people come and chat to you and engage with you as you're walking?
Yeah, because we've got the live tracker on, I'm hoping people will come out and engage, and these are for anybody I meet who either is, having a bit of low mental well-being, or people who might have lost loved ones to suicide.
Okay, so you're all about encouraging, you're all about raising awareness.
Yeah.
You need to raise money, you want to raise money as well.
Absolutely.
Tell me, the reason for the horse is because you want to attract attention.
Yeah, I thought, well, what's going to make
what they needed was a family friend.
And then
she probably wouldn't have committed suicide if she had a family friend.
Draw attention. And then I thought, yeah, I'll just put a life-size mannequin with me, because obviously Brodie was...
Maybe the mother's a bit fucking crazy.
Okay, brilliant. Well, let's come over to your brother and your mum. So we've got Simon and we've got Pam. Tell us about your sister. What do you think of what she's doing?
Oh, she's amazing. We've all found it very, very difficult, of course. But Emma, how she just does what she does, and the message that she's raising is so important. That she's an inspiration. She's fantastic. Absolutely amazing.
And Pam, you all live together. How are you going to be without her for a couple of weeks?
House will be tidier. No, but at least she's still battling on and trying to help others. So I'm really, really proud of her.
Trying to help others. Well, your daughter killed herself. I mean,
well, so.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
I hear you were a second mum to Brodie.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You couldn't have been a very good mum.
It's obviously incredibly. Oh, we can't imagine. But you guys are, you're doing absolutely everything you can to help others.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. But yeah.
I help people all the time.
Us all, to lose someone like that.
Well, we're just going to have one very quick word with David. David, this is your showground. This is everything. Just tell us, you made me laugh this morning. Tell me about what you said about Dick Whittington.
Well, he took his cat to London, didn't he? Well, Emma's taken up.
Yeah, I took loads of pianos to London. I sold pianos to all the
Yeah,
families.
thank God she's a horsey person, not a swimmer, isn't it?
Thank goodness you're not having to frost it. This was Brodie's favourite place competing here. And the entire walk.
Rest in peace, Brodie.
Yeah, it's all about Brodie.
Well, look, we wish everyone well there, and we'll watch with interest throughout the morning. Thank you very much. If you've been affected by any of the issues raised, help is available.
Yeah, my mate across the road, Keith Gordon, he's dead because the NHS sectioned him.
Action line.
If you were watching us yesterday,
And the breakfast inbox went, yes, supersonic is the appropriate phrase.
we followed up a few of those messages to find out more. Hear your stories. Here they are.
Following the lottery scratch card win in 1996, Diane and I flew on a Concorde charter trip to Paris for our silver wedding.
I've been in Paris.
With my son on my lap and a glass of champagne in my hand. It was one of the most amazing experiences of my life to fly on that iconic aircraft.
I was here one day for the Open Championship, and Concorde came swooping in across the golf course like a supercharged seagull.
And every time we heard that amazing roar, we used to go out into the garden and watch it go over. It was a wonderful sight.
That very first time of hearing that roar, that noise, there's nothing quite like it.
The aircraft was very compact when compared to commercial airliners. As often mentioned, the takeoff acceleration was incredible.
The smell of the leather seats will always stay with me.
I was sitting on my own and I was talking to a very nice flight attendant who asked me if I would like to go to the flight deck.
They wanted everyone to experience the Mach 2 speed opportunity, which Concorde
afforded everyone.
But our abiding memory was when our silver service meals were served. No pre-packed meals in those days.
Lobster and grilled salmon, served with tropical mango, kiwi fruit and melon.
The crew were absolutely brilliant. Maureen went onto the wing with the crew and walked up and down the wing. I also went onto the wing and looked into the cabin through the window. At Mach 2, it's a little bit difficult, but I managed.
As we came to land, Captain Mike Bannister said, "Welcome to New York, Rebecca," and he put the nose down.
We were also encouraged to take the salt and pepper condiments away, souvenirs.
So from the flight, I've still got things. I've managed to keep my ticket.
eBay's just messaged me, and they're saying if I reduce my Henley's hoodie by £2, it's going to sell. But I think eBay, you're full of shit. You're fucking rubbish. You know what I mean?
Exciting to fly on. Sadly, it's no longer with us.
Everybody we spoke to felt that that plane belonged to them. So it was a wonderful memory, and I'm glad that it's being remembered this year.
Time now is 7:31. Let's go back to our main story now. It's now more than 24 hours since the start of that 4-day temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and the peace appears to be holding after hostages and prisoners were exchanged. So we can bring up the image here. These are the 13 Israeli women and children released from Gaza yesterday, along with a further 11 foreign workers. They'd all been held hostage by Hamas, which is designated a terrorist organization by the UK government since October the 7th. For example, if you look at the image here, you can see in the middle, the young boy in the glasses there. Everyone, of course, has their own story, but that is 9-year-old Ohad. He celebrated his 9th birthday whilst he was being held in Gaza. He was released along with his mother and grandmother, and these are the images of the other 13 in all who were released. So, under the terms of the temporary ceasefire deal, 39 Palestinians, all women and teenage boys, were freed from Israeli jails to be reunited with their families. Further hostage and prisoner releases will continue today. Meanwhile, the temporary pause in fighting has also allowed for the biggest influx of aid to Gaza since the war began, with more lorries lined up to carry in fuel, food and medical supplies. The UN is warning it's still not enough as the humanitarian crisis continues. We saw some of those images of the trucks travelling through early yesterday morning, and that has continued today.
Let's talk to Bushra Khalidi from Oxfam. Bushra, good to have you with us this morning. We've been reporting this as a moment of hope in what's been an awful conflict, in a hopeful light.
I mean, we very much hope that this is a step in the right direction for a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire and for real political, genuine will to end this once and for all. This has been going on for more than 57 years of military occupation on the occupied Palestinian territory, a brutal, illegal blockade on Gaza for the last 17 years. And this is the most unprecedented attack by Israel on Gaza ever, and causing the most unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe probably the world has seen in the last few years. So yes, hope, but not enough. And it's a very fragile hope. And echoes from Gaza, from my family, from my colleagues and my friends, doesn't necessarily echo the same hope that we have here in the comfort of our own homes. Most of them are displaced, they're destitute, they're hungry, they're thirsty, they're mourning, they're tired, they're anxious, they're traumatized, and they've lost their homes. And that losing a home is like losing your future. It's losing hope for your future. So it's a very complex situation to call it complete.
Yeah, I'm just finding this place, right?
Hope is once we have
and yeah, it's just women section units. Because the NHS are fucking little bastards. I want to fucking destroy them. If you want to have a war, come to the United Kingdom and attack mental health.
Some aid has been allowed in across
Psychiatrists, doctors, fucking attack them.
Has got through. What impact is that having? What more is going to get through? And how are you seeing that operation pan out?
Well, through the Rafah crossing with Egypt, it's important to note that before the 7th of October, Gaza was 70% of Gazans were already dependent on aid because Israel controls the airspace, the borders, the sea, and the land space, and any entry of goods or exit of goods and of people as well. So it was already at the brink of the humanitarian situation, and now we've seen a complete collapse of the entire of Gaza in its entirety, really. The logistical challenge of delivering aid to 2.2 million people while not being allowed through our normal routes. Our normal route is through the Israeli crossing, Kerem Abu Shalom, which is the south, and we've not been allowed through. So we've had to set up an entire humanitarian response through routes we're not used to using. And, you know, I mean, a big, we have to also, admire the work of the Egyptian Red Crescent that really pulled its weight, because it's not, meant to respond to Gaza. We are meant to respond to the crisis and not actually having our offices there and our teams there. So that's one part, an aspect of the challenge. Also, it's very important to remind people that this temporary pause, it doesn't restore water back to Gaza that Israel cut off on the 9th of October. It doesn't restore back electricity. It doesn't build back homes, 60% of which have been destroyed. It doesn't build back hospitals. The healthcare system has collapsed. It doesn't build back bakeries. And it brings very little fuel, and fuel has been one of the most contentious issues in the last 6 weeks. I've got my family there burning garbage to cook because now wood is too expensive to buy. It's on the black market. I mean, wood and water and yeast and flour and salt have become luxury items. So no matter how many trucks enter, no matter how, and even the fuel is only a third of what actually Gaza needs daily. It does actually meet the needs of 2.2 million people, half of which are children, and most of them displaced, destitute, and homeless, and have nowhere to go back to. Another thing that's very important to note is that people during those 4 days would have really liked to go back home. For those of those families that have their homes still standing, that's not been allowed. Nobody has been allowed to go back to the north. And I feel like that would have been given a lot of respite to people who could have gone and just rested at home for a few days before intensifying bombardment starts again, as Israel promised.
Bushra, thank you so much. Bushra Khalidi, who's policy lead at Oxfam. Thank you for your time with us here on Breakfast.
Thank you.
7:38 on Saturday morning. Jane's got sport for us now. So, Jane, talk us through the emotions, points deduction. Are we talking anger, sadness, bitterness, unfairness? What's the mood?
Well, I mean, it's going to be a really big, hard, uphill battle for Everton now. Sean Dyche was speaking for the first time since they were docked 10 points. So they were 14th in the league. They dropped to 19th. They're in the relegation zone. And it's not because of anything that's happened on the pitch. It's because also, obviously, it's a disproportionate punishment. Well, Premier League returns this weekend following the international break, of course. Everton fans, though, are still reeling after watching their club drop to 19th. Manager Sean Dyche has spoken for the first time about the record-breaking 10-point deduction they've been hit with for breaking financial fair play rules. He says the focus now is on putting in their best performance against Manchester United on Sunday.
Everyone in these parts was shocked, and seemingly the wave of noise after that seems like most people in football, around football, are shocked. The enormity of it, disproportionate, is a word that's been used by the club, and so obviously we're going to fear be aggrieved by that. On the other hand, it doesn't change the focus. The focus since he got here has been sort of doing that on the pitch.
Well, Also on the pitch, Manchester City are first up in the Premier League later. They host Liverpool in the lunchtime kickoff. And manager Pep Guardiola has said the intense rivalry that's developed between the two sides, and specifically with Jurgen Klopp, has made him a better manager. It is a match that many fans are eagerly anticipating, and a win for Klopp's Liverpool over the current league leaders would take them back to the top for the first time since May 2022.
A super exciting football game. One of these, I would watch wherever I am on the planet. I would, because why wouldn't you watch this game? So it's like everything there you need. But for us, it's not about being excited, that kind of excitement. So like, oh my God, I can't wait. So we have to prepare it properly. And we know we have to be at our best.
Always has been a big rival and a good game for the both sides, both teams, and positive approach to the games, no speculate few, and I think always have been attractive games. But I'm pretty sure. So he made me. I said many times he made me better manager.
Well, Leeds United missed out on a 7th win in 8 championship matches as they were held to a 1-1 draw by Rotherham. They took the lead through Crysencio Somerville after completely dominating the first half. Hakeem Odoffin then levelled the score for Rotherham. The result leaves Leeds in 3rd, 7 points behind Leicester. Rotherham are 3rd from bottom. Katie Taylor says she's never felt more motivated as she bids to regain the world light welterweight title later. She lost for the first time in her career 6 months ago to England's Chantel Cameron. Well, Taylor heads into the ring for their rematch in the unusual position of being the underdog in front of her home city fans. Taylor is hoping to inflict a first career defeat upon Cameron.
It's the biggest fight in female boxing, probably of all time. And if Katie Taylor can somehow overturn this, I think it's one of the best small comebacks of all time. Just because the fight was close, but it was a very emphatic defeat. It was a very clear-cut decision that Cameron won the first fight. And if Katie Taylor can somehow overturn the decision, it'll be a true sign of her greatness.
Looking forward to that. That will be a cracking fight. Now to Formula One. Charles Leclerc is the man to catch ahead of qualifying later for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. That's the final race of the season. Friday's second practice had to be shortened to 20 minutes after this. Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz lost control in turn 3, and Haas driver Nico Hülkenberg also crashed. Leclerc was fastest ahead of Lando Norris, with world champion Max Verstappen in 3rd. Mercedes continued to struggle though. Lewis Hamilton was 8th fastest behind teammate George Russell. So rugby now, and Sale are top of the Premiership after a narrow 11 points to 9 victory over Bath last night. It followed a late George Ford penalty. Elsewhere, Northampton Saints edged past Harlequins. Ollie Slightholme with a couple of tries for Saints, including this crucial score late on. Harlequins who are in 3rd. 2 matches today as Gloucester host Leicester, while Bristol travel to inform Saracens. So that's a 2nd consecutive defeat for Quins, but a 4th win for Northampton, Charlie.
Thank you very much, Jane. See you later on.
We're heading into winter, and the NHS is preparing for a very busy few months. The strain is showing in some places.
Yes, figures from one hospital trust in Hull show patients at A&E waited longer than 4 hours before they were admitted or sent home. Anne-Marie Tasker has been speaking to people in the East Yorkshire town of Hornsey about the service there.
Hospital waiting lists.
You waited for 4 hours and then you were sent home.
And NHS dentistry in crisis.
NHS is fucking rubbish.
National headlines. What's healthcare like for people living in our coastal communities? We've come to Hornsey Indoor Bowls Club in East Yorkshire to ask some questions. How many of you can't see an NHS dentist?
Well, we phoned as far as Scunthorpe, Barnsley, and there's waiting list on a couple of them, but we're 3,000. 3,000 in front of us, and I'm 73. Without my number of club, I don't think I'll need a dentist. Can't get one. I'm just letting them fall out. I've got one left.
Have you been to A&E, and did you wait more than 4 hours to be admitted or sent home?
The first time I went, I waited about 7 hours. Then I was really poorly. I went back to to the doctors the following Monday, and he sent me straight back to A&E. He said they should have done a head scan because it's quite a big head injury. And they did, I waited 11 hours then.
My husband was
She waited 11 hours.
ambulance
Head injury. And she waited 11 hours. Fucking NHS. I want to fucking get a machine gun and blow you to pieces.
Unfortunately, had further issues in the following week. And we had to wait an hour for an ambulance, followed by about 12 hours before he was admitted. It's a bit of a lottery.
Have you waited longer than a week to get a GP appointment? And has it taken longer?
I'm going back in time. I'm going to when I was a piano man. I never see a doctor. Didn't fucking want to see a doctor. Didn't need to see a doctor. So I'm going back into the old days. And I'm going to be like that. I want to say, fuck it. I don't need a doctor. You know, I don't need to go to a hospital. If the NHS come around and fucking force me into a section unit, I'll fucking kill the cunts. I will strangle the cunts. I will, honestly.
I had one hip replacement in 2015. They were fantastic. But then I was diagnosed with the other hip knee replacement. My walking is so restricted now. Last time I checked with the waiting list, it was 50 weeks.
And finally, have you paid for private medical treatment?
I'd gone to A&E by ambulance, very good. They took me in there, got me through, put me in one of the bays that they put you in. And 18 hours later, they decided to put me on a ward. And I was in there for 9 nights, almost lost my life. But still, they didn't push things forward for me to have the operation. The waiting time was just far too long.
How long was it?
2 to 4 years. So
It's 13 minutes to 8. We will be back with the headlines.
2 to 4 years waiting for an operation. And then they paid £10,000 and went private because the NHS are fucking shit. I knew they were shit when they fucking sectioned me. I couldn't believe how they fucking sectioned me. Oh, you're unwell, you're playing music, and they sectioned me.
We asked the BBC's international editor how close he's been able to
18 fucking years locked up by the NHS.
and about
Dodgy
the pros and cons
fucking
of recruiting
bastards.
while embedded with the Israeli Defence Force. First, the big event of the week in Westminster, Wednesday's autumn statement from the Chancellor was preceded, as is usual on these occasions, by an appearance on BBC One on Sunday morning. But, as has also become usual, Jeremy Hunt didn't give much away to Laura Koonsberg about the announcements he planned to make a few days later.
You don't want to do anything that could see inflation taking off again. Translate that, it means no income tax cuts this week.
But you'll have to wait. I know you're very experienced, Laura. You know I'm not going to give you any indication of
But
my
I also
actual
know that
measures.
you could break tradition, use the lower figure, which would mean less money in the pockets of some of the most vulnerable people in this country. You can clear that up right now. Are you going to follow convention or not?
Laura, you know that I'm not going to say this morning what I'm going to announce to Parliament on Wednesday.
Why change inheritance tax when you have the lower paid struggling to pay their bills? This isn't asking you to confirm it. It's a question of principle. Why would you do that when people are having such a hard time?
I'm sorry to say that I'm not going to be drawn on any individual taxes. I think you can read the papers this morning and you can see that I'm going to abolish every single tax.
Andy Gilding was watching that interview with the Chancellor and
He's going to abolish tax. I've never paid tax.
What is the point in having him on before the autumn statement? We all know that Laura will ask frustratingly difficult questions, and we know that the stock answer is that he can't possibly comment before announcing it to the House of Commons. Surely it would be common sense to have Mr Hunt on next week, when he would be able to answer the questions fully and in detail. We asked BBC News for an answer to that, and they told us. An interview ahead of the budget gives an understanding of the minister's thinking and the principles behind his decision-making. Whilst we appreciate viewers may want more specifics about the budget, getting to grips with the context a week before the budget is officially announced allows for a greater level of scrutiny. The interview was a chance to question the minister on other areas as well, with Laura challenging him on the financial impacts of the biggest stories of the week, including the inflation figures, tax levels being at a record high, and the government's challenges with its Rwanda policy. After Jeremy Hunt had actually made his speech on Wednesday, BBC cameras, along with those of other media, were positioned in their traditional spot for a big day at Westminster on College Green, just outside the Houses of Parliament in central London. Political correspondent Ione Wells joined Ben Thompson there on Wednesday afternoon to provide some analysis of what had been announced.
The government will be hoping the headline is that they've given us a tax cut. A lot of criticism that it's not a tax cut. This is simply it's a reduction, but we're still paying more tax overall.
So I think certainly the hope from the government is that people will feel better off, and they've done that through a number of sort of measures, one of which, of course, is this cut to the main rate to national insurance from 12% to 10%.
It's, of course, very much not the first time we've featured noisy protesters drowning out broadcasts at Westminster, and Darren Robertson was the latest viewer to object. I couldn't hear or concentrate on the answers due to the loud disruption. Why on earth can't a quiet place away from Westminster be used, with a picture of the Houses of Parliament in the background if deemed necessary? Please, put your viewers and licence payers first. And Paul Bowden agreed. BBC News' determination to hold outside interviews near the Houses of Parliament whilst disruptive shouting and music playing is going on is just daft. Relocate to a studio, for goodness sake. Friday's temporary ceasefire in the Middle East provided the first glimpse of hope in a conflict that's been running for 7 weeks. For much of that time, the BBC's international editor, Jeremy Bowen, has been reporting from Israel, having travelled there directly from another war zone, Ukraine, just hours after the rocket attack from Gaza.
It feels as if this crisis is going up a gear. Extreme pressure on civilians in Gaza. Tension here in Jerusalem. No one knows where this is going, but it's certain this is a dangerous moment, the worst Middle East crisis in a generation. We don't have much detail about what the Israelis are doing inside Gaza. They are working very hard to control the information battlefield, which is a big part of modern war. We went into Gaza with the Israeli army on condition we didn't reveal their positions. Video shot after they took us through the gap in the fence into Gaza, though not this script, had to be submitted to their military censors.
Jeremy Bowen joins us now. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on Newswatch. You talked very clearly about there were terms on your being embedded with the Israeli Defense Force. Have they confiscated or blocked any of your filming while you were there?
No, not at all. They had certain rules, not showing the faces of all but a few nominated officers, not showing positions, not showing screens inside their rather advanced military vehicles. And so when the cameraman, Fred Scott, was filming, he was aware of those rules and sort of worked around them. And then when we had put together the edit, the completed edit, the producer filmed it on her phone and sent it via WhatsApp without the commentary to the IDF, who had a look at it, and about 5 or 10 minutes later said, we don't have a problem with that. So, yeah, it was important to mention that we'd had to abide by Israeli censorship regulations, but they weren't particularly onerous, I'd say.
Because some people might be wondering whether the BBC should be agreeing to such terms at all.
Well, it was a choice. You know, we got to go in there and take a look at what was going on and sign the paper and agree to their rules, or we could stay out. And I felt that on balance, it was worth doing that. It gave me certainly a really eye-opening insight onto the amount of damage in northern Gaza. Not one building was left intact. I mean, the whole place has been turned into a wasteland. And I wouldn't have known that if we hadn't got in. I mean, for me, that was the big takeaway of the whole thing. And, you know, it's not just the Israelis who do this. In other countries I've been in, Iraq under Saddam Hussein, we've had to submit to censorship. So it's not, you know, totally unheard of, but I think the important thing is to be transparent about the rules that we agree to. And sometimes when you are reporting in a war or an authoritarian society like Iraq in the 1990s, you sort of have to pay a bit of a price to lift the curtain and see what's underneath it. And that's what we had to do with Gaza, because the whole area is under Israeli military control. And as I said in one of those clips you played, they are working very hard to control the information battlefield.
Yeah. In a way, Jeremy, you've led me on to my next question, which is there have been disputed incidents, notably he was responsible for the bombing of the Al-Aqsa hospital at the start of the war. How are you going about verifying different competing claims from either side?
Well, to be honest, it's very difficult when you don't get full access to the place. I mean, as a reporter who's been going to conflicts for, God, more than 30 years, I think I've done more than quite a bit over 20 wars. I've learned the best way to verify anything is to be there yourself, to use your own eyes to see and your own ears to hear. And now, when you can't do that, then you have to try other things, which is looking at video that comes out, trying to talk to eyewitnesses, and even if not direct, on the phone or these days via text, WhatsApp. WhatsApp does an awful lot of business in reporting these days. And so it's not totally satisfactory. And sometimes that's why in the heat of the moment, things aren't quite accurate, or sometimes mistakes are made and they're not accurate at all. So then the important thing is to recognize when you've gone wrong and hold your hands up.
Yeah. Now, the BBC does have a presence in Gaza, but you've been operating, as we've been discussing, from the Israeli side. Does it feel like a problem that you are only seeing one side of the war?
Yeah, I think it's a great big problem. I mean, I'd like to be able to move around freely. I'd like to be able to go in and out. I'd like to be able to try to get to the places and report from there myself. But it can't be done because the Israelis have completely sealed the place off. And from a journalistic point of view, if you weren't there on October the 7th, which in effect means if you weren't part of the resident Palestinian press corps that lives there and works there, then there's no access. And the only access that there has been on these trips organized by the Israeli army, for which you have to sign up to certain rules.
Jeremy, Newswatch viewers have been expressing quite a lot of concern for the last few weeks that Ukraine's been pushed out of the news by the reporting from Gaza. And of course, you were there in Ukraine immediately before. I wonder if you share that concern.
Well, I think the Middle East story has been huge. So you can understand why in this period of, it's about 6 weeks now, that it has absolutely dominated all world news coverage. I mean, the problem is, that there's never enough bandwidth in terms of, I think, mental bandwidth among journalists and airtime as well. I think it's been understandable that Ukraine has taken a back seat in terms of news coverage in the last 5-6 weeks, but clearly if that continued, it wouldn't be a good thing because people are being killed, they're bashing away at each other. It's a horrendous situation. But I think it will be back in the news and on news programs. Fear not, it's bound to be.
Jeremy Bowen, thank you so much for coming on Newswatch. Thank you for all your comments this week. If you want to share your opinions about what you see or hear on BBC News, on TV, radio, online and social media, email newswatch@bbc.co.uk, or you can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, @NewsWatchBBC. You can call us on 0370 010 6676 and do have a look at previous interviews on our website, bbc.co.uk/newswatch. Do get in touch, particularly if you might be interested in joining in a discussion we're planning for our last programme of the year in 3 weeks' time. If you've got thoughts on how the BBC has covered the news this year, I would like to appear on the Newswatch sofa to express them. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, goodbye.
This is Planet Earth 3. Watch new episodes every Sunday on BBC iPlayer.
Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. Free at last. The Israeli hostages released by Hamas spend their first night back with their families.
Palestinian prisoners have also been freed as part of a deal that sees a 4-day pause in fighting, allowing much needed aid to get into Gaza.
Calm in Dublin overnight as a Hague's presence prevents a second evening of rioting in the city.
As Doctor Who celebrates its 60th anniversary, we find out how the reboot of the programme has benefited Cardiff, where it's filmed.
Good morning. Everton's manager reacts angrily to their 10-point deduction. Sean Dyche says he was shocked by the punishment and that the club would appeal. It's the first time he's spoken since they dropped into the relegation zone.
Good morning. It is a cold and frosty Saturday for all of us this morning, but at least there will be some beautiful sparkling winter sunshine out there. Yes, it's going to stay dry and settled for most, but it will be rather cold with it. All the details coming up shortly.
Good morning. It's Saturday, the 25th of November. 24 hours into a 4-day temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the peace appears to be holding after the hostages and prisoners were exchanged. Further releases and the delivery of humanitarian aid will continue today.
13 Israeli women and children and 11 foreign workers were the hostages released yesterday by Hamas, which is designated a terrorist group by many Western governments. 39 Palestinians were released from Israeli jails in a deal brokered by Qatar. Our Middle East correspondent Yolan Nell reports on a rare moment of hope in the conflict.
An arrival to celebrate at this Israeli children's hospital, as many of the freed Israeli hostages were flown in last night, much to the relief and happiness of a crowd of well-wishers. The women and children were said to be physically well. Altogether, 13 Israelis were released after they spent almost 7 weeks being held captive by Hamas in Gaza, along with 11 foreign workers.
Hamas is
Earlier video released by the military wing of Hamas shows the moment they were taken to. These are the youngest of the hostages, Aviv, who's 2, and her sister Raz, who's 4, shown in a family video. They were snatched by Hamas gunmen with their mother, Doron, while visiting their grandmother. Their father, Yoni, recently showed us a video of them being taken captive on the 7th of October. Following their release, he said, "I'm happy that I've got my family back, but I won't celebrate until the last of the kidnapped returns." Ahad marked his 9th birthday in Gaza. He was released along with his mother Karen and his grandmother Ruthie, but his grandfather Avraham is still being held. A relative gave his reaction to the BBC.
We couldn't believe it until we saw it with our own eyes, them on the ambulances and on the buses making their way home. This is truly, it's very exciting. We're still scared and worried about Avraham again, but this is one step towards being happy.
Meanwhile, this is the oldest of those returning home, Yafa Adar, an 85-year-old mother of 3, grandmother to 8, and great-grandmother to 7 children. And for many other families, the day was bittersweet. Some 240 people were seized as hostages, and most remain in Gaza. Under the terms of the temporary ceasefire deal, 39 Palestinians, also women and children, were freed from Israeli jails to be reunited with their families. They were accused of a range of offences, from throwing stones to attempted murder. Some had been convicted and others held without trial. Large crowds turned out to greet those returning to the occupied West Bank at this Israeli checkpoint. One of those released was Mara Bakir. She was 16 when she was arrested 8 years ago for a knife attack on an Israeli police officer and had nearly served her sentence. She told journalists the release deal followed the deaths of many people, adding, "This is unhappy and uncomfortable." Like Mara, many of the prisoners had been in solitary confinement. As their coach arrived, some inside danced in celebration. Someone was wrapped in a Palestinian flag. Meanwhile, the truce is allowing the biggest influx of aid to Gaza since the war began, with more lorries lined up to carry in fuel, food, and medical supplies. Still, with a deep humanitarian crisis, the UN warns this isn't nearly enough. Today, more Israeli hostages and more Palestinian prisoners are set to be released. as the pause in fighting continues. For both sides, the promise of a little more relief. Yolande Knell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
So we can speak to Yolande now. Morning to you, Yolande. So we have the temporary ceasefire apparently holding. We have some success with the hostages and the prisoners exchanged. Just look ahead for us now.
Yeah, so we're expecting to see some of the same choreography that we saw yesterday over the course of the day, with hostages handed again to the International Committee of the Red Cross. They're making their way out via Egypt to Israel. We know that already Israeli security officials have been handed the list of hostages expected to be freed by Hamas. Once they are on Israeli territory, that clears the way for another release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails, and that list should also be handed over Palestinian. Now, already what we're seeing with the truce sticking is this big increase in aid continuing, going in through the Rafah crossing. Lorries have been lined up there from early. Yesterday, more than 200 lorry loads of aid went in, including the desperately needed diesel fuel that can be used to run things like water desalination plants, can go to hospitals for their generators. And there was cooking gas as well. Israel has previously been banning that or restricting it extremely heavily because it says it's worried it could end up in the hands of Hamas. UN agencies have said they're going to be able to guarantee what happens to every drop of that fuel. But really, we've had aid agencies now getting more of their officials into Gaza and telling us just about the dire humanitarian situation that there is there. The head of the biggest agency that operates in Gaza on behalf of the UN, he talked about how people are exhausted, they're losing their hope in humanity. He said he'd managed to go in 2 weeks ago, and it was very dramatic just how much the situation had deteriorated since then. And talking too about how difficult it is to get aid, not just into the south of the Gaza Strip, but up to the hundreds of thousands of people who remain in the northern part.
Yolande, for the moment, thank you very much. Time now is 7 minutes past 8. Naga, more details and focus on events in Dublin. Just sort of tell us where we are this morning. What's happened?
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. We have had a number of arrests made overnight. No repeat, though, of Thursday night's widespread violence. That saw 500 rioters attacking shops, vehicles. There's still underlying tensions, aren't there, that still need to be addressed there?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think, actually just over the last hour or so, a government minister has told the BBC that over the past few years, there has been a growth in these far-right ideologies and activists, really. And some of that sprang up over COVID, he was saying. There is a minority of people, not the majority at all, but it sprang up over COVID, against COVID measures and against LGBTQ people as well. But obviously, over the past few days, you saw it manifest in the way it has, and the kind of anti-immigration side of things as well, really. I think there will be questions to be answered in terms of what could have been done. Could anything have been done sooner, possibly? Because some of the people I've spoken to here, and you do have some people saying, well, there were signs that protests had been done by these far-right activists. Could something have been predicted as something like this would have happened? I think it's difficult to predict anything on the level that was seen on Thursday, especially that it happened after what had transpired earlier in the day, of course, because we must remember this all started at 1:30 on Thursday afternoon when stabbings took place outside of a school in Dublin where a 5-year-old was critically injured, is still in hospital, and a school care assistant is also critically injured, with 2 other children also injured in that attack. And rumours swirled on social media about the origin of the suspect in that stabbing. What we do know about the suspect is that he is 40 years old. He's an Irish citizen. He's lived here for 20 years. But those rumours spiraled, and as we know, social media influences can transpire into big things, and that's exactly what was seen in Dublin on Thursday evening. Transpired mob mentality. Government ministers have also said that it wasn't just far-right activists taking involved in the violence on Thursday, that actually there was opportunists taking to the streets as well, causing in parts of that riot. So we're still waiting to get an update on those that were critically injured in the stabbing, and an update again on those involved in the rioting on Thursday from the Garda here. And anything we hear, I'll let you know as soon as we can.
Thanks for that, Tomas Morgan there for us. The Home Secretary James Cleverly has said the government's plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda is not the be-all and end-all. The plan was ruled as unlawful by the Supreme Court last week. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Charlotte Rose. Charlotte, those comments made by the Home Secretary in the Times newspaper, are we seeing this as a stepping away of that Rwanda policy?
Morning, Naga. Well, I think it certainly signals a shift in tone from the government, and in some ways it was going to have to do that because 10 days ago it lost that court battle when the Supreme Court ruled its Rwanda policy is unlawful. So it makes sense and is obvious in some ways that James Cleverly has to say it's not the be-all and end-all, and people need to stop fixating on the methods and instead focus on the mission, which is, of course, in the government's words, stopping the boats. It's also interesting because it seems to be a bit of a response to his predecessor, Suella Braverman. Viewers might remember her parting shot to the government was to say that it has no plan B if the Rwanda policy fails. James Cleverly clearly saying in this article there are a wide range of policies the government is looking at, and he highlights the deal it's done with Albania to return many of the Albanian migrants who've arrived in the UK in small boats. Interestingly, in the past hour, the BBC has heard from the former editor of Conservative Home, Tim Montgomery, who says he thinks the comments from James Cleverly suggest a kind of wider shift that the Conservatives are making, possibly dropping the focus on voters in the Red Wall and instead refocusing on traditional Conservative voters down south, and therefore dropping some of the strong rhetoric on immigration and plans to drop the UK's association with the European Convention on Human Rights, and instead trying to focus on a more pragmatic approach, doing deals with European neighbours, and of course bringing in the former Prime Minister David Cameron is a big part of that approach.
Charlotte, thanks very much for that. Charlotte Rose there for us. The Labour Party will be unlikely to meet its spending targets on green initiatives if it gets into government, a source has told the BBC. The party had initially pledged £28 billion a year as part of the Green Prosperity Plan, which includes increasing the number of wind farms and solar panels. A senior figure close to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said the state of public finance means that the target will probably not be reached. The mother of one of the 4 teenage boys killed in a car crash in North Wales has paid tribute to him. Harvey Owen died alongside his friends Jevon Hurst, Will Flitchett and Hugo Morris during a camping trip last weekend. In a statement, Crystal Owen said Harvey was laid back, charismatic, cheeky, creative and funny. She said he was a boy that preferred to be outside and active. He was the most gentle soul, always feeling empathy for people and seeing the good in everyone. The Metropolitan Police will hand out leaflets to protesters at pro-Palestinian marches about the use of offensive and potentially illegal words and phrases. 100,000 people are expected to attend a protest in central London today. HSBC says it's still working on getting its mobile and online banking services up and running. Our former US police officer convicted of murdering George Floyd in Minneapolis has reportedly been stabbed in prison. He's said to have been seriously injured. George Floyd's death in 2020 sparked a wave of protests against police brutality and racism. Efforts to free 41 construction workers stuck in a collapsed tunnel in northern India have once again been hampered by the failure of drilling equipment. Rescue workers are trying to install a pipe that's wide enough for men to be pulled. Broke down again. Louise is taking a look at the weather for us. Louise, it's certainly taken a turn. We were warned about this by Matt yesterday, but it's definitely turned chilly, don't you think?
It certainly has, and I've got the evidence as well, Naga. This was yesterday morning, quite a lot of cloud around, windy. You can see it's sort of starting to produce the little waves on the water there, but it was mild with it. Temperatures actually sat at around 6 to 8 degrees for many, but just look at this morning, particularly in Oxfordshire, we've had lows of -7. We've got lots of sunshine to go with it, but there is a widespread frost, our first of the season out there. Plenty of sunshine to go with it, though, as I say. A little bit of fair weather cloud lapping in off the Irish Sea through the northwest and across Wales, and maybe the cloud and that breeze down through the North Sea, producing the risk of an odd isolated shower. But on the whole, despite that cold start, the sunshine will continue to lift the temperatures and hopefully compensate. Those temperatures still a little below par for this time of year. We're looking at maximums throughout the afternoon of around 3 to 6 degrees in much of Scotland, 6 to 8, maybe 9 down to the southwest. And the reason being here, a little more cloud which will spill in through the evening and overnight across southwest England, across Wales and gradually into Northern Ireland. Some showery outbreaks of rain as the weather front moves in. Now, sheltered eastern areas will keep some clear skies, temperatures just below freezing, perhaps not quite as cold a start tomorrow, but it might actually feel a little bit colder as we go through the day, because generally, as this frontal system continues to produce quite a lot of cloud around, we're not going to see anywhere near as much sunshine tomorrow. Maybe the far northeast of Scotland, some sunshine here, a bright, chilly start, but then clouding over further east. And so with that cloud around, it could be really quite dismal out there. And certainly when you factor in the rain as well. So top temperatures in eastern areas around 5 or 6 degrees. Out to the west, we might just get double digits here, so not quite as cold. But looking ahead, that frontal system has to move through. It slips its way south and east out of Sunday into Monday. It will continue to bring some rain, some cloud with it as well, but behind it, quite a clearance. So some showery outbreaks of rain on moving its way south and east across England and Wales. Sunnier spells into Scotland, Northern Ireland, and eventually into Northern England with a few scattered showers coming in off the North Sea once again. Top temperatures, though, still below par really for the end of November. We're still looking generally between 6 and 8 degrees, keeping those double digits into the southwest. But the emphasis through our week ahead is to keep that cold air with us. And if frontal system moves through, when we've got that cold air in place, it does mean that some of us could actually see some of the white stuff. Yes, we could have some snow towards the end of the week, chiefly a light dusting to higher ground. But do keep abreast of the forecast, because that cold air is going to be with us right throughout the week. Back to you two.
Louise, thanks very much.
Time now is 17 minutes past 8. The COVID-19 public inquiry has heard testimony this week from some of the key figures at the heart of the government's response to the pandemic.
Amongst those giving evidence, scientific, medical, during that period.
It was a bit like getting the old band back together. All those scientists we got used to hearing in the pandemic.
There are some things that need to be in place.
We'd seen so much of them because of this government mantra.
We will follow the science.
We'll be guided by the science, and that's why we're following the scientific advice in the way that we are.
But very quickly, the inquiry heard that became unhelpful to the scientists.
It was a millstone around our necks.
The strikers who score the wonder goals are the ones who make the headlines. Actually, the hard yards are done by the defenders and by the defensive midfielders, tracking back.
His memorable metaphors made him popular, yet Professor Sir Jonathan Van Tam, JVT, told the inquiry his workload was horrendous, and so was the abuse.
Because of the cat. As it happened, we didn't want to leave the cat.
Rishi Sunak told the Commons on Wednesday that the government always took scientific advice, but questions over his Eat Out to Help Out scheme, introduced in the summer of 2020 when he was Chancellor, kept coming.
We didn't know about until it was announced, and I think our advice would have been very clear.
Another recurring theme was the timing of when decisions were made and whether they could have been made earlier, especially when it came to lockdown.
I've rejected, and I will continue to reject, your characterisation of this as overreaction, because that implies that I thought in a sense the action should not happen. What I thought should happen is that people should be aware that without but the downsides of those actions should be made transparent.
So a big week of science and scientists, but as ever, the politics and the role of politicians crept in too. It sets up the next few weeks rather nicely. Next week, there'll be a feel of I'm former cabinet minister, get me out of here, with Matt Hancock due to give evidence at the end of the week. He's faced plenty of criticism already during these hearings. No doubt he'll have plenty to say. Ellie Price, BBC News, for the COVID inquiry in London.
Ellie Price reporting there. Now, the time is 20 minutes past 8, so filling your car with fuel has been made quicker at some pumps with the option to pay at the pump, but the banking system for authorising that payment is causing some problems for people.
Yes, 24's Moneybox reporter Dan Whitworth has been looking into this for us. So let's go through the procedure that people are familiar with, Dan. You pull up to a station. The old days, you always used to have to go into the booth, didn't you, to pay?
Absolutely, yeah.
But you can push the buttons, put the card in. We know the procedure. What's the problem?
The problem is, so this is all about the pre-authorization, which is what happens if you use this pay at the pump service, and it's available in about 20% of the UK's petrol stations, and there are 8,300 of those. So it's fairly common now. The idea is you put your card in before you even lift the nozzle, you put your card in and you accept a pre-authorization charge. Now, on a lady called Paula Walker's case, that pre-authorization charge is £20. And that's just ring-fenced by your bank. It's not taken, but it's ring-fenced, it's protected.
And crucially, it's done by the bank.
Absolutely, this is a payment process issue. So you take your nozzle off, fill your car up, put your nozzle back, and the way it's supposed to work is the pump, within a few seconds, a few minutes, normally, should then tell your bank, don't worry, they didn't spend £120. Again, in Paula's case, they spent £35. Now, off the record, that's supposed to happen within a maximum of 20 minutes, and it usually happens in real time, so basically straight away. In Paula Walker's case, that didn't happen, and she had £45 to last until payday. So it was just 2 days before payday. So she put £35 of fuel in her car. She had £10 to go and spend on food for her and her son. No problem at all. She got to the supermarket till, though, she couldn't spend her £10, looked on the old banking app. Why not? Because there's this pending charge still of £120. So it left her with no money, no food, and no way to do anything about it.
How much time had elapsed?
Between then and when she got to the till, just a few minutes. But she was stuck, she told me, for 48 hours.
I then found that I couldn't access my account. I couldn't get to my last £10. So we had to scrimp and save and see what was in the cupboard for the dinner. But it also meant that I couldn't access my last £10 the next day either. And it took me into an unarranged overdraft. And I then, of course, have the inconvenience of having to do the live chat with the bank and just wait.
So as you can see, I mean, there's a proper real impact on someone like Paula.
Pay at the pump. If this is an issue, why do so many supermarkets have this? And petrol stations have this?
Well, retailers like pay at the pump because, of course, you don't have to pay staff to sit inside a petrol station, so it's cheaper and it is growing. And as I say, 20% of petrol stations now offer it. And some petrol stations don't even have cashiers anymore. Now, speaking to the supermarkets, the Petrol Station Retailers Association, banks, card providers have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on this one. The supermarkets say, as we were talking about before, this is a payment process issue. You need to speak to the banks. And again, in the majority of cases, this will work. But I've been really burrowing down into Paula's case. I've spoken to her bank. They identified the transaction. They realized, they confirmed, yes, she was without her money for 48 hours. And then be ring-fenced. It effectively stayed ring-fenced until that £35 was processed as a charge, which took 2 days to happen. And that effectively meant she was locked out of her account. You just heard, she went into an unofficial overdraft. So it didn't work for Paula.
How can you stop this in this situation? Because there will be plenty of people, and you do see the signs now on the pumps that so much will be reserved or withheld.
Yeah.
How do you stop this from happening? Because you don't have these buffers.
Now, look, pay at the pump, it's a growing service. A lot of people, it's very convenient. I use it occasionally, but it does come with sometimes unintended consequences, as Paula found out.
Really interesting, as always.
Thank you very much.
No, it is. You come into us a lot, often as not. You mention these things, and everyone's filled up the car. A lot of people now will have done that pay at the pump thing. Now you're just thinking, okay, maybe not a good time.
It works, but you just need to know these things and to know to pay the cashier or use pay at the pump. So yeah, just know these things.
Some supermarkets, then petrol retailers might not be happy with you now because if they're trying to move to pay at the pump. But that's your problem. Dan, thanks so much.
Doctor Who fan?
Doctor Who. The old style, sort of 80s, 90s, not so much the new thing. I'm going to be in trouble with Doctor Who fans.
Well, maybe give it a try tonight.
I will. Big one tonight, though, isn't it?
6:30 tonight it begins. Big day for Doctor Who fans. The first of 3 special episodes is on BBC One this evening. It marks 6 decades of time-travelling entertainment.
Can we crank up the music or not?
Takes you back. It does.
That's good. Now we're in the mood. Time Lord is particularly popular in Cardiff, where the show has been made since 2005.
Now, since then, it's brought an estimated £130 million to the area, as our reporter Hugh Thomas has been finding out.
Well,
On a big day for the Doctor, what does this TV series mean for Wales? It's been made here since 2005 and has been a soaraway success with audiences and a Welsh drama production sector that has swelled as a result. The two women behind the relaunch almost 20 years.
Bloody minded determination that that's what we're going to do. I never felt it was a risk to bring back Doctor Who. I thought that that's what I had been waiting for many years.
Cardiff quickly became a backdrop for a succession of new doctors, including Jodie Whittaker, and it's estimated to have contributed over £134 million to the Welsh economy. But alongside it, other dramas like Casualty came, creating a sustainable industry where producers suddenly found that Wales had the crews and resources they needed. Doctor Who's backers had faith from the start.
We've always believed the crews are here, the locations are here,
The study into Doctor Who's economic impact found that other big productions trusted Wales to deliver what was required, and the sector now provides employment in high-end TV jobs that were previously quite rare. It's helped by a push from the big broadcasters to make more shows outside London.
People are scrabbling about to make sure that they are the ones filming in Wales. I think people have grown with Doctor Who, and there's been so much investment in that talent.
It's an exceptional industry here.
It was very exciting for me to make it to Cardiff. I'm a Swansea boy. I've always worked in the regions. I've never lived and worked in London, never. And I'm a great passionate believer. I've lived in Manchester for many years. I've made Queer as Folk there, done tons of dramas there with a Manchester flavour to it. But I'm fundamentally Welsh, so to bring it here was a great opportunity. I think if they'd asked me to make Doctor Who in London, I would have refused.
Dr. Kang!
Request today to take large bully type dogs.
None of us have space. The reason we only have stray dogs here is we don't have room to take dogs that
Bring their XL to sleep before the third pay to have the dog insured, neutered, chipped and certified. Never a decision for these pet owners in Peterborough.
Whether I have to get loan, whether I have to do this, I will do everything to keep my dog.
Patch was dumped by her previous owner.
Would you be concerned with her around children or something, say? No, you wouldn't?
Joining the legions of unwanted. John Ironmonger, BBC News.
Time now is 8:34.
So, Jane, tell us a story about a football manager. And what is this? A sense of grievance, a bit of bitterness about how his club has been treated? Would that be fair?
Well, I don't know about bitterness. He's certainly not happy because the last couple of seasons, Everton have had a difficult time of it. They've now doing a bit better. They were 14th, and then they were docked 10 points, and it was for breaching financial fair play rules. So not his fault. So naturally, he's upset about it, and there's going to be a lot of hard work for Everton to do. And the Premier League does return this weekend, of course, following the international break. So ahead of their
everyone, well, certainly everyone in these parts was shocked. Disproportionate is a word that's been used by the club, and so obviously we're going to feel